Hey dreamers, tonight we descend into one of mythology's most haunting love stories, the tale of Persephone, radiant maiden turned queen of the underworld. From fields of sunlight to the shadowy halls of Hades, her journey holds the secret to life and death, and the force that changes every season. As night grows still, let your mind wander through ancient Greece, where wildflowers line rolling hills, olive trees stretch to the sky, and distant thunder promises something otherworldly beneath the earth. Here, the gods are never far, and in the quiet dusk the fate of a single goddess will soon entwine with the ruler of the deepest shadows. But why did Hades choose Persephone to rule by his side, and what did she find in the darkness that the living world could never offer? Why did her disappearance plunge the world into grief, and what bargain did she strike in the very heart of darkness? What mystery binds life and death, spring and winter, hope and loss, in a single goddess? Let these mysteries drift through your thoughts as you find comfort between sunlit meadows and hidden realms. If these stories truly help you relax, feel free to leave a gentle like. If you'd like, you're welcome to share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you now. Tonight, you're among fellow dreamers, held in the turning of the year and the quiet between worlds. In the beginning, long before her name would echo in reverence or cast ripples of fear, you would have known her simply as Kor, the maiden whose story shaped the turning of the year. Born of Zeus, king of the gods, and Demeter, goddess of the harvest, Kor was marked for greatness before drawing her first breath. You can almost see Demeter, cradling her daughter amidst fields of wheat, sunlight catching her hair so that it shimmers like spun gold. Demeter wasn't just any mother. Her moods shaped the living earth itself. When she felt joy, you'd witness blossoms bursting everywhere, painting the world in colours so vivid you could almost taste spring. But if sorrow touched her heart, even the strongest grain would wilt. You sense how all of Demeter's love and protective power was devoted to Kor, a bond destined to be tested in ways the world had never seen before. Remember this. We'll return to the fate of this bond later on, because when Kor vanishes, the world itself will unravel. Fields will wither, seasons will break, and every living thing will feel her absence. You follow Kor as she grows up in a place that feels forever spring, meadows rolling out like green carpets, laughter tangled with the voices of nymphs and minor deities, every day an invitation to adventure. You see her racing through fields with the oceanids, the sea nymphs whose playful shouts fill the air. With each light step, Kor turns the earth into a riot of colour, daisies, crocuses, violets bursting wherever she passes. What stories of childhood adventures would make your heart feel lightest? For me, it's always the ones where every day feels touched by discovery, where summer never ends and wonder is found around every bend. Maybe as you listen, you remember a moment in your own life that felt just like that. As Kor matures, her beauty begins to draw the gaze of gods and mortals alike. You watch the transformation, seeing her dark hair become a river of midnight silk, eyes shining with wisdom and innocence at the same time. She carries herself with grace, her skin glowing as though lit from within, and her song holds such power that even the birds fall silent just to listen. But there's more to Kor than grace or charm alone. You start to sense her deep connection with the living world, a bond that runs beneath the surface, beyond anything Demeter or the nymphs ever taught her. Whenever Kor wanders through the woods, trees lean down, as if longing for her blessing. When she kneels beside a stream, the waters seem to clear, sparkling as she dips her fingers in. Her companions are not only nymphs but foxes, deer and rabbits, creatures most would see only in fleeting glimpses. Imagine Kor sitting quietly beneath ancient oaks, letting the deer come close enough to eat from her hand, or watching rabbits curl up beside her as she rests, all of nature recognizing something kindred in her spirit. Yet, for all her gentle power, there's a sense that the perfection of this spring won't last forever. You begin to wonder, what force could possibly pull Kor beyond this paradise, and what truly waits for her in the shadow between worlds? The days of her youth were filled with activities that would seem simple, but were actually profound expressions of her growing divinity. You watch as she and her companions would spend entire afternoons weaving garlands from wildflowers, each bloom carefully selected not just for beauty but for its symbolic meaning. Roses for love, lilies for purity, ivy for faithfulness. She understood the language of flowers in ways that went far beyond the decorative. Sometimes, on particularly warm afternoons, She would lie in meadows and listen to the whispers of growing things. The grass would share secrets about the movement of underground streams, and the wildflowers would tell her which insects were their favourites for pollination. This ability to communicate with plant life was something that came as naturally to her as breathing, though she didn't yet fully understand its significance. Her mother Demeter watched over these peaceful days with a mixture of pride and an almost fierce protectiveness. You sense that Demeter had experienced losses in the past that had made her wary of allowing her daughter too much freedom. The goddess of the harvest had seen how cruel and capricious the other gods could be, and she was determined to shield Kor from their machinations. This protection, while born of love, had begun to create its own tensions. As Kor grew older, she felt an increasing desire to explore beyond the familiar boundaries of her mother's domain. She would stand at the edges of meadows, gazing toward distant mountains and wondering what lay beyond. Sometimes, when the wind was right, she could catch hints of other realms, the salt tang of the distant ocean, the earthy scent of deep forests, even stranger fragrances that spoke of places she had never imagined. You watch one particular morning as Kor wakes with an unusual restlessness. The sun streams through the windows of the beautiful palace where she lives with her mother, but instead of bringing its usual comfort, the light seems to call to her with an urgency she's never felt before. She dresses carefully in a chiton of the palest green, the colour of new leaves, and adorns her hair with a crown of fresh flowers that seem to glow with their own inner radiance. As she steps outside, you notice that the very air around her seems different today. There's an electric quality to it, as if the cosmos itself is holding its breath in anticipation of some great event. The nymphs who usually accompany her everywhere seem unusually subdued, casting worried glances at each other when they think she isn't looking. But Kor, focused on the strange pull she feels toward a distant meadow, doesn't notice their concern. She walks with purposeful steps through her mother's domain, past the olive groves where silvery leaves shimmer in the morning light, past the vineyards heavy with grape clusters that seem almost ready to burst with sweetness, past the grain fields that wave like golden seas in the gentle breeze. The meadow that calls to her lies at the very edge of the world she knows, a place where her mother's direct influence begins to fade and other, more mysterious forces hold sway. As she approaches, you can see that this is no ordinary field. The grass grows in patterns that seem almost deliberate, and the flowers that dot the landscape appear to have been arranged by some divine hand. But what captures Kor's attention most completely is a single flower, growing in the very centre of the meadow. It's unlike anything she has ever seen before, a narcissus of extraordinary beauty, its petals seeming to shift colour in the changing light. As she draws closer, you can see that the flower appears to glow with an inner fire, its fragrance so intoxicating that it makes her feel slightly dizzy. This is no natural bloom, though Kor doesn't realise it yet. The narcissus has been placed here by Gaia herself, the primordial earth goddess, acting on the secret instructions of Zeus. It's a trap, beautiful and irresistible, designed to lure the innocent maiden away from her guardians at precisely the right moment. The flower pulses with an almost hypnotic energy, and you can see how impossible it would be for anyone to resist its allure. As Kor reaches toward the narcissus, her nymph companions hang back, suddenly reluctant to approach. They can sense something ominous about this place, but their warnings are lost in the sound of the wind rustling through the grass. The young goddess kneels beside the flower, extending her hand to pluck it, and you feel the tension in the air reach an almost unbearable intensity. The moment her fingers touch the narcissus's stem, everything changes. The earth beneath her feet begins to tremble, gently at first, then with increasing violence. The flower comes away easily in her hand, but where its roots had been, the ground begins to split and crack. The fissure spreads rapidly, opening into a chasm that seems to descend into the very heart of the world. From this impossible depth comes a sound unlike anything you have ever heard. The thunder of hoofbeats magnified 1,000-fold, the roar of wheels on stone, and beneath it all, a voice calling her name with an authority that makes the very air vibrate. The nymphs scream and flee, but Kor finds herself frozen in place, clutching the narcissus to her chest as she stares into the abyss that has opened before her. And then he appears. Hades, lord of the dead, king of the underworld, emerges from the chasm in a chariot of polished obsidian drawn by 4 magnificent horses, whose coats seem to be made of living shadow. Their eyes glow like embers, and their breath creates clouds of mist that smell of deep caverns and ancient mysteries. The god himself is a figure of terrible majesty, tall and powerful, with hair as dark as the space between stars and eyes that hold the depth of eternity. He is not the monster that later stories might paint him as, you realize. There is a strange beauty to Hades, the austere magnificence of winter landscapes and starlit nights. His face is stern but not cruel, and when his gaze falls upon Kor, there is something in his expression that speaks of longing held in check for far too long. Persephone, he calls, using a name she has never heard before but somehow recognizes as belonging to her. His voice resonates with power, but there's also a note of something almost like pleading. Come with me. What's the most terrifying moment you can imagine? For me, it has to be that split second when you realize your entire world is about to change forever. There's something both thrilling and terrifying about standing at the edge of the unknown. Before Kor can respond, before she can even fully process what is happening, Hades reaches down and sweeps her up into his chariot. The Narcissus falls from her nerveless fingers as they plunge into the chasm, and the last thing she sees of the world above is a circle of blue sky growing smaller and smaller until it disappears entirely. The journey to the underworld is like nothing you could imagine. They race through passages carved from living rock, past underground rivers that glow with their own phosphorescent light. The walls are studded with gems that sparkle like captured stars, diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and stones that have no names in the world above. The air grows cooler and thinner, carrying scents of earth and metal and something indefinable that speaks of vast spaces and ancient time. Kore, now truly becoming Persephone, though she doesn't yet understand the full significance of the transformation, clings to the sides of the chariot as they hurtle through this alien landscape. Her initial terror is beginning to give way to a strange kind of wonder. This realm is unlike anything she has ever experienced, not evil, as she might have expected, but simply other. It operates according to different rules, follows different rhythms, serves different purposes than the bright world above. The horses finally slow as they emerge into a vast cavern lit by the glow of countless torches. This is the heart of Hades' domain, and the sight that greets them is breathtaking in its austere grandeur. The ceiling disappears into shadows high above, supported by pillars of black marble veined with silver. In the distance, you can see the dark waters of the river Styx, where Charon, the ferryman, continues his eternal task of transporting souls to their final rest. But what strikes you most forcefully is the sense of order here. This is not the chaotic realm of torment that some might imagine the underworld to be. Instead, it is a place of profound solemnity and dignity, where the dead are treated with respect and the cosmic balance between life and death is maintained with meticulous care. Hades helps Persephone down from the chariot with a gentleness that surprises her. His touch is cold but not unpleasant, like marble that has been polished smooth by countless years. He leads her through his palace, past halls where the architectural style speaks of power exercised with wisdom rather than tyranny. "Why have you brought me here?" Persephone finally finds her voice to ask, though the question comes out as barely more than a whisper. Hades pauses in his stride, and for a moment his composed expression falters. "Because I have loved you from the first moment I saw you," he admits, and there's a vulnerability in his voice that makes him seem suddenly less godlike and more human. "I have watched you from afar, seen your kindness to all living things, witnessed the joy you bring to everything you touch. I cannot exist in your mother's bright world, and I knew she would never willingly allow you to enter mine." This confession hangs between them like a bridge neither quite knows how to cross. Persephone can sense the truth in his words. This abduction was not born of mere desire, but of a loneliness so profound it had driven even the king of the dead to desperate measures. "But I didn't choose this," she whispers, and now there are tears streaming down her face. "I didn't choose to leave everything I know and love." "No," Hades acknowledges, his voice heavy with something that might be regret. You didn't choose this, but perhaps, given time, you might find that what you have gained outweighs what you have lost. Meanwhile, far above, Demeter has discovered her daughter's disappearance. You can feel her grief and rage rippling across the earth like shockwaves from an earthquake. The goddess of the harvest searches frantically, calling Persephone's name until her voice is hoarse, following every stream and checking every grove where her daughter might have wandered. For 9 days and 9 nights, Demeter searches without rest. She travels to the ends of the earth, questioning every river god and forest nymph, pleading with every deity she encounters. But none can or dare tell her the truth about what has happened. The narcissus that lured Persephone away has withered to nothing, leaving no trace of the trap that was laid. On the 10th day, Helios, the sun god who sees all that passes beneath his light, finally takes pity on the frantic mother. Your daughter lives, he tells her, his voice gentle but grave. But she is beyond your reach now. Hades has claimed her as his bride, and Zeus gave his consent to the match. The news strikes Demeter like a physical blow. Her beloved daughter, her precious core, has been given away like a piece of property without her knowledge or consent. The rage that fills her is unlike anything the world has ever seen. It's the fury of a mother whose child has been stolen, magnified by divine power, until it becomes a force that could reshape creation itself. In her grief and anger, Demeter abandons her duties entirely. The crops that depend on her blessing begin to wither and die. The trees shed their leaves out of season, and the grass turns brown and brittle. What started as divine wrath quickly becomes a catastrophe that threatens all mortal life. People begin to starve, and their prayers to the gods become increasingly desperate. Which mythological figure do you think would be the most challenging to spend a day with? For me, it has to be Demeter during this period of grief. The raw power of a mother's love turned to fury is something that could level mountains. While the world above slides toward disaster, Persephone begins to adapt to her new existence in ways that surprise even her. The initial shock and terror of her abduction gradually give way to curiosity about this strange realm and its enigmatic ruler. She discovers that the underworld is far more complex than she had imagined, with its own forms of beauty and meaning. Hades, for his part, proves to be an attentive and surprisingly thoughtful host. He makes no demands upon her, asks nothing more than her presence at meals and her willingness to walk with him through his domain. He shows her the Elysian fields, where heroes and the righteous dead spend eternity in perfect contentment, playing games and recounting the great deeds of their lives. He takes her to the asphodel meadows, where ordinary souls wander in a peaceful state between memory and forgetting, neither blessed nor punished, but simply existing in a kind of eternal twilight. There's a strange beauty to their serenity, and Persephone finds herself moved by their quiet dignity. Most significantly, he shows her the administrative heart of the underworld, the great halls where the judges of the dead determine each soul's fate based on the life they have lived. She watches as Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Iacchus weigh deeds and intentions with infinite care, ensuring that true justice is done for each individual who passes through their domain. This is why I cannot leave, Hades explains as they observe the proceedings. This realm requires constant oversight, endless attention to detail. A single mistake in judgment could disrupt the cosmic balance that keeps both life and death functioning as they should. Persephone begins to understand that her husband, and she, has gradually come to accept that this is what he is now, despite the circumstances of their union, is not a tyrant, but a guardian. The underworld is not a prison, but a necessary component of existence itself, as vital to the cosmic order as her mother's harvest. As days pass into weeks, she finds herself taking on small responsibilities within the palace. She begins to greet newly arrived souls, offering them comfort during their transition from life to death. Her natural compassion makes her uniquely suited for this role, and soon the dead speak of the gentle queen who welcomes them with kindness rather than judgment. But her growing acceptance of her situation doesn't diminish her love for her mother or her longing for the world above. She misses the feeling of sunlight on her face, the scent of flowers in bloom, the laughter of her nymph companions. These memories are like bright jewels in the dark fabric of her new existence, precious beyond measure but painful to contemplate. Hades notices her melancholy and tries to ease it in the only ways he knows how. He has gardens created in the depths of his palace, filled with flowers that glow with their own inner light, beautiful in their strange way, but not quite the same as the living blooms of the world above. He has musicians play for her, and while their songs are hauntingly lovely, they carry an undertone of sadness that speaks of loss and endings. Meanwhile, the crisis in the upper world has reached a point where even Zeus cannot ignore it any longer. The other gods approach him with increasing urgency, warning that if something isn't done soon, all mortal life will cease to exist. Without humans to worship them and offer sacrifices, the gods themselves will begin to lose their power. Reluctantly, Zeus sends Hermes, his messenger, to the underworld with instructions for Hades to release his bride. The young god arrives in the realm of the dead with his usual flair, his winged sandals allowing him to navigate the treacherous passages with ease. He finds Hades and Persephone in the throne room sitting side by side in chairs of carved obsidian. "Uncle!" Hermes addresses Hades with the casual familiarity that only family can get away with. "Father sends word that you must allow your wife to return to the world above. Demeter's grief is destroying everything, and if it continues, there will be nothing left for any of us to rule over." Hades receives this news with the stoic composure you might expect from the king of the dead, but Persephone sees the flash of pain that crosses his features before he can hide it. For all the power he wields in his domain, he is helpless against the decree of Zeus. "Of course," Hades says quietly, "I would not see the world destroyed for my own desires." He turns to Persephone, and his voice becomes gentler. "My queen, it seems you are to return to your mother's realm." Persephone's feelings at this moment are impossibly complex. Relief at the prospect of seeing her mother again wars with an unexpected reluctance to leave this place that has become, if not exactly home, then at least familiar. And there's something else. A growing recognition that her relationship with Hades has evolved beyond mere captor and captive into something deeper and more complicated. "When must I go?" she asks. "Now," Hermes replies, his usual cheerfulness somewhat subdued by the solemnity of the moment. "Time is running short in the world above." As they prepare to depart, Hades makes one final gesture that will change everything. "My queen," he says, offering her a pomegranate that seems to glow with inner fire. "You have eaten nothing during your time in my realm. Please take this small refreshment for your journey." The pomegranate is beautiful beyond description, its ruby seeds gleaming like captured starlight. Persephone knows she should refuse. She has heard the stories about the food of the dead and its binding properties. But something in Hades' expression stops her from declining outright. Perhaps it's the love she sees there, mixed with resignation and a hope so fragile it's heartbreaking. Perhaps it's her own recognition that eating the fruit would give her a reason to return to this realm that has become meaningful to her in ways she's still discovering. Or perhaps it's simply the fact that she is, after all this time, genuinely hungry. What small decisions in your life have had the biggest consequences? For me, it has to be the seemingly insignificant choices that end up redirecting everything. There's something powerful about how tiny moments can reshape destiny. Without fully understanding why, Persephone takes the pomegranate and bites into it. The taste is unlike anything she has ever experienced, sweet and tart and somehow infinitely complex, carrying hints of all the flavors that exist in both the world above and the realm below. She eats 6 seeds before the fruit slips from her fingers, her eyes widening as she realizes what she has done. "Now you belong to both worlds," Hades says softly, and there's no triumph in his voice, only a kind of sad acceptance. "Part of you will always remain here, just as part of me will always yearn for the light above." The journey back to the world above passes in a blur of emotion and sensation. Hermes guides them through passages that seem to brighten with each step, until finally they emerge into sunlight so brilliant it makes Persephone shield her eyes. The first thing she notices is that something is terribly wrong with the world she left behind. Where once there had been green meadows and blooming flowers, now there is only barren earth and withered plants. The trees stand leafless and skeletal against a grey sky, and the air carries the scent of decay rather than growth. This is the world that her mother's grief has created, a landscape of perpetual winter that reflects the desolation in Demeter's heart. But then Demeter appears, and all the devastation around them is forgotten in the joy of their reunion. The goddess of the harvest runs toward her daughter with tears streaming down her face, and when they embrace, you can feel the very earth respond to their happiness. Green shoots begin to push up through the barren ground, flowers unfold their petals toward the sun, and the air fills with the song of birds returning to the awakening land. For a moment, it seems as if everything might return to the way it was before. But then Demeter notices the lingering scent of pomegranate on her daughter's breath, and her expression changes to one of horror and grief. "You ate the food of the dead," she whispers, and the words carry the weight of inevitable tragedy. "Only 6 seeds," Persephone says, as if this might make a difference. But both goddesses know that it doesn't matter how much she consumed, any food from the underworld creates an unbreakable bond. The cosmic laws that govern such things are absolute and cannot be bargained with or circumvented. Zeus, arriving to oversee the resolution of this crisis, decrees a compromise that satisfies no one completely but prevents the total destruction of either realm. Persephone will spend 6 months of each year in the underworld with Hades, 1 month for each pomegranate seed she consumed. The remaining 6 months she will live in the world above with her mother. This solution creates the rhythm that will govern the natural world for all time. When Persephone descends to the underworld, Demeter's grief causes autumn and winter to grip the land. Plants go dormant, animals hibernate, and the world enters a period of rest and reflection. When Persephone returns each spring, Demeter's joy causes everything to burst into new life. Flowers bloom, trees leaf out, crops grow, and all of nature celebrates the reunion of mother and daughter. But this cyclical separation is more than just an explanation for the seasons. It represents something profound about the nature of existence itself, the recognition that life and death are not opposites but partners in an eternal dance. Growth requires periods of dormancy, and renewal is only possible through the experience of endings. As the years pass, Persephone grows into her dual role with grace and wisdom that amazes even the other gods. In the world above, she becomes a patron of growth and fertility, working alongside her mother to ensure bountiful harvests and healthy crops. She teaches mortals the secrets of agriculture, showing them which seeds to plant when and how to prepare the soil for maximum yield. Her knowledge of both life and death makes her uniquely qualified to understand the full cycle of existence. She can sense when plants are ready to be harvested, when fields need to lie fallow, when the natural world needs to rest before beginning the cycle anew. Farmers learn to watch for her signs and follow her guidance, knowing that prosperity depends on honouring the rhythm she embodies. But it is in her role as Queen of the Underworld that Persephone truly comes into her own. The compassion and empathy that made her beloved in the world above serve her well in dealing with the dead and the dying. She becomes known as a goddess who offers comfort to those facing their final transition, helping them understand that death is not an ending, but a transformation. Newly arrived souls find in her a gentle guide who helps them navigate the complexities of their new existence. She explains the rules and customs of the underworld with patience and kindness, making the transition from life to death less frightening and more meaningful. Her presence brings a warmth to the realm of the dead that it had never known before, softening its austere majesty with genuine care for those who dwell there. Stories begin to spread among both gods and mortals about her interventions on behalf of the dead. When Orpheus descends to the underworld seeking to reclaim his beloved Eurydice, it is Persephone who is moved to tears by his music and pleads with Hades to grant his request. Though Orpheus ultimately fails to trust in the promise he was given, Persephone's compassion makes the attempt possible. When Heracles comes to the underworld to capture Cerberus as part of his 12 labors, Persephone ensures that he is treated with the respect due to a hero rather than an intruder. She understands that some mortals have earned the right to challenge even the gods, and she makes certain that such courage is acknowledged rather than punished. Which underworld myth do you find most moving? For me, it has to be Orpheus and Eurydice. The idea of love so powerful it could move the rulers of the dead speaks to something fundamental about human nature. Her growing mastery over both realms also brings her into conflict with other deities whose domains intersect with hers. The dispute over Adonis provides a perfect example of how her dual nature creates complex situations that require diplomatic solutions. When Aphrodite brings the infant Adonis to the underworld for safekeeping, she doesn't expect Persephone to become attached to the beautiful child. But as Adonis grows into a young man of extraordinary beauty, both goddesses find themselves drawn to him in different ways. Aphrodite sees in him the perfect embodiment of physical love and desire, while Persephone is moved by a deeper recognition of the role he might play in the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. The dispute that arises when both goddesses claim Adonis reveals the complexities of divine emotions and the challenges of sharing power across different realms. Zeus's solution, that Adonis should spend part of each year with each goddess, with the remainder of the time being his own choice, creates a parallel to Persephone's own divided existence. But when Adonis chooses to spend his free time with Aphrodite rather than Persephone, it highlights the fundamental difference between their natures. Aphrodite offers immediate pleasure and gratification, while Persephone represents deeper truths about transformation and renewal that may be less immediately appealing but ultimately more profound. The tragedy that befalls Adonis, his death while hunting, possibly orchestrated by a jealous Ares, demonstrates the costs of focusing solely on the pleasures of life while ignoring its deeper meanings. Persephone's role in this story is not as an active participant, but as a witness to the consequences of choices that prioritize immediate gratification over long-term wisdom. These experiences with other deities and mortals help Persephone develop a sophisticated understanding of the relationships between different aspects of existence. She learns that her role as queen of the underworld is not separate from her identity as a goddess of growth and renewal, but intrinsically connected to it. The mysteries that develop around her worship reflect this integration of apparent opposites. The Eleusinian Mysteries, the most sacred and secretive religious rites in the ancient world, center on her story and its meaning for mortal understanding of life and death. Initiates into these mysteries undergo a symbolic journey that mirrors Persephone's own experience. They descend into darkness, confront the reality of mortality, and emerge with a transformed understanding of what it means to be alive. The secrets they learn cannot be spoken of openly, but the change in their demeanor is unmistakable. They carry themselves with the confidence of those who no longer fear death because they understand its place in the larger pattern of existence. The sacred drama enacted at Eleusis recreates key moments from Persephone's story, but with an emphasis on its spiritual rather than narrative significance. Participants experience the terror of the initial abduction, the disorientation of finding themselves in an alien realm, the gradual adaptation to new realities, and finally, the recognition that what seemed like a tragedy was actually a necessary transformation. The pomegranate seeds play a central role in these mysteries, representing not the trap that some interpretations suggest, but a conscious choice to embrace a fuller understanding of existence. The initiates learn that eating the food of the dead doesn't condemn one to eternal darkness, but rather grants access to wisdom that is impossible to gain from the realm of the living alone. This understanding of Persephone's story as a tale of conscious choice rather than victimization becomes increasingly important as her worship spreads throughout the ancient world. She becomes a patron goddess for those who must navigate difficult transitions, women entering marriage, soldiers facing battle, travelers embarking on dangerous journeys, and anyone confronting major changes in their circumstances. Her dual nature makes her uniquely qualified to guide such transitions. She understands what it means to be torn from familiar surroundings and forced to adapt to new realities. She knows the fear and uncertainty that accompany major life changes, but she also knows the strength and wisdom that can emerge from successfully navigating such challenges. The iconography associated with Persephone reflects this multifaceted identity. She is depicted sometimes as the innocent maiden gathering flowers, sometimes as the powerful queen seated beside Hades on their shared throne. But the most compelling images show her in transition, stepping between worlds, holding both flowers from the upper realm and gems from the lower, embodying the bridge between different states of existence. Her sacred animals include both creatures of the light and darkness. Deer represent her connection to the natural world and her gentle nature, while serpents symbolize her association with the underworld and her understanding of life's hidden mysteries. Owls, birds that can see clearly in darkness, serve as messengers between her two realms. What animal do you think best represents transition and change? For me, it has to be butterflies. The complete transformation from caterpillar to butterfly seems like the perfect metaphor for the kind of profound change Persephone undergoes. The festivals celebrating Persephone acknowledge both aspects of her nature through their timing and rituals. The spring celebrations welcome her return from the underworld with flowers, dancing, and feasts that emphasize renewal and new life. But the autumn festivals that mark her departure are equally important, characterized by solemn ceremonies that honor the necessity of endings and the wisdom that comes from accepting rather than fighting natural cycles. These seasonal observances help communities understand their own place in the larger patterns of existence. They learn to see their individual lives as part of cycles that extend far beyond their own brief time on Earth, gaining comfort from the knowledge that their contributions to the ongoing story of life will not be lost with their deaths. Persephone's influence extends beyond formal religious observances into the everyday experiences of those who honor her. Farmers consult her signs when deciding when to plant and harvest, understanding that her dual nature gives her unique insight into the optimal timing for agricultural activities. Women facing childbirth seek her protection, knowing that she understands both the life-giving and potentially dangerous aspects of bringing new beings into existence. Poets and artists find inspiration in her story, seeing in it themes that resonate across all human experience. The tension between innocence and experience, the challenge of integrating different aspects of identity, the necessity of loss as a precondition for growth. These elements of her myth speak to universal human concerns in ways that remain relevant across cultures and centuries. But perhaps most importantly, Persephone serves as a model for how to find meaning and purpose in circumstances that were not originally chosen. Her story suggests that even experiences that begin as trauma or tragedy can be transformed into sources of wisdom and strength through conscious engagement and gradual acceptance. This doesn't mean that her abduction by Hades should be seen as justified or acceptable by modern standards. Rather, it means that her response to these circumstances, Her decision to find ways to thrive rather than merely survive, to discover sources of meaning and joy in her new situation, to use her experiences to help others facing similar challenges, provides a template for resilience that transcends the specific details of her story. Her relationship with Hades evolves over time from captor and captive to genuine partners in the cosmic work of maintaining the balance between life and death. This transformation doesn't erase the problematic nature of their initial encounter, but it does demonstrate the possibility of creating something positive from even the most difficult beginnings. Modern readers might find this aspect of her story challenging, and rightfully so. The idea that a relationship begun through abduction could develop into something healthy and fulfilling runs counter to contemporary understanding of consent and agency. It's important to approach this element of the myth with critical awareness while still appreciating the deeper truths it attempts to convey about adaptation, growth, and the potential for finding meaning in unexpected circumstances. What the story does successfully communicate is the reality that many people face situations they didn't choose and cannot easily escape. Persephone's example suggests that even in such circumstances, it's possible to find ways to exercise agency, to grow in wisdom and compassion, and to use one's experiences to benefit others. Her role as Queen of the Underworld eventually becomes not just a title she bears, but a calling she embraces. She brings innovations to the realm of the dead that reflect her understanding of both worlds. She establishes gardens where souls can find beauty and peace during their transition. She creates spaces for newly arrived spirits to process their grief and confusion before moving on to their final destinations. Most significantly, she institutes regular councils where the judges of the dead can consult with her about particularly complex cases. Her perspective, shaped by experience in both the realm of the living and the land of the dead, often provides insights that help ensure truly just outcomes. She becomes known for her ability to understand the full context of choices made during life, taking into account not just actions, but the circumstances that led to those actions. This judicial role reinforces her position as a goddess of transformation rather than punishment. While she doesn't interfere with the basic operations of cosmic justice, she does ensure that mercy and understanding are part of the process. Souls who demonstrate genuine remorse for past mistakes find in her an advocate who helps them understand how their experiences of suffering can become sources of wisdom. Her seasonal returns to the world above become not just reunions with her mother, but opportunities to bring the insights gained in the underworld back to the realm of the living. She shares with mortals the wisdom of the dead, their perspectives on what truly matters in life, their understanding of the importance of relationships and kindness over material success, their recognition that every moment of existence is precious precisely because it is temporary. These teachings influence how people approach their daily lives. They learn to see their current circumstances, however difficult, as temporary and potentially transformative. They develop greater appreciation for simple pleasures, sunlight on their faces, the taste of fresh water, the laughter of children, because they understand through Persephone's example how precious such experiences become when viewed from the perspective of eternity. The agricultural knowledge she brings back from the underworld includes understanding of the deeper connections between soil health and plant growth. She teaches farmers about the importance of allowing fields to rest, about the role of decomposition in creating fertility, about the ways that apparent death can nurture new life. These lessons extend beyond farming into general principles about sustainability and the wise use of natural resources. As her legend spreads, Persephone becomes associated with the broader human quest for meaning and purpose. Her story suggests that true fulfillment comes not from avoiding difficult experiences, but from engaging with them consciously and learning from them. She embodies the principle that wisdom is often born from suffering, but only when that suffering is transformed through understanding and compassion. Her example encourages people to look for opportunities for growth even in their darkest moments. Just as she found ways to bring light to the underworld and depth to the world above, her followers learn to seek the hidden gifts in their own challenging circumstances. They discover that experiences that initially seem purely negative often contain the seeds of unexpected insight and strength. This philosophical dimension of her worship attracts not only those facing personal crises, but also thinkers and seekers who are drawn to the deeper questions about the nature of existence. They find in her story a sophisticated exploration of themes like the relationship between consciousness and experience, the role of choice in shaping identity, and the possibility of finding freedom even within apparent constraints. What life lesson has had the biggest impact on your perspective? For me, it has to be learning that endings and beginnings are often the same event viewed from different angles. There's something profound about recognizing that every conclusion contains the seeds of something new. The mysteries associated with her worship develop into elaborate philosophical systems that influence art, literature, and spiritual practice throughout the ancient world. These traditions maintain that true understanding of life requires direct experience of its opposite, that one cannot fully appreciate light without having known darkness, cannot value freedom without having experienced constraint, cannot understand growth without having witnessed decay. This paradoxical wisdom becomes central to many spiritual traditions that draw inspiration from Persephone's example. They teach that the deepest truths about existence are often revealed through encounters with what seems to oppose or negate life, and that the most profound transformations occur through willingness to journey into the unknown and potentially frightening aspects of experience. Her story also provides a framework for understanding the relationship between individual growth and cosmic order. Her personal journey from innocent maiden to wise queen parallels the larger patterns that govern the natural world, suggesting that individual development and universal principles are not separate phenomena but different aspects of a single underlying reality. This integration of personal and cosmic significance makes Persephone particularly relevant to those seeking to understand their own place in the larger scheme of existence. Her example suggests that even seemingly private experiences of loss, adaptation, and growth contribute to the ongoing work of maintaining balance and harmony in the world. Her influence extends into the realm of the arts, where her story provides rich material for exploring themes of transformation, duality, and the search for meaning. Poets find in her journey between worlds a metaphor for the artist's ability to move between different levels of reality and bring insights from one realm into another. Painters and sculptors are drawn to the visual possibilities inherent in her dual nature. The contrast between her appearance as the flower-crowned maiden and the jewel-adorned queen, the interplay of light and shadow that characterizes her iconography, the symbolic richness of objects associated with her worship, like pomegranates, flowers, and precious stones. Musicians compose works that attempt to capture the emotional complexity of her story. The terror of abduction, the loneliness of separation from everything familiar, the gradual dawning of understanding and acceptance, the joy of reunion tempered by the knowledge that it is temporary, and the hard-won wisdom that emerges from having experienced the full spectrum of existence. These artistic interpretations keep her story alive across generations and cultures, each new rendering adding layers of meaning while preserving the essential elements that make her myth universally resonant. They ensure that her example continues to provide guidance and inspiration for those facing their own journeys of transformation and growth. Her worship also influences practical approaches to healing and counseling. Those who work with people experiencing trauma, loss, or major life transitions find in Persephone's story a model for understanding the process of adaptation and recovery. Her example suggests that healing involves not just returning to a previous state, but integrating new experiences and insights in ways that lead to greater wisdom and compassion. Therapists and healers learn to recognize the potential for growth that exists within experiences of crisis and disruption. They help their clients understand that the disorientation and fear that accompany major life changes are not signs of failure or weakness, but natural responses to the challenge of adapting to new circumstances. This therapeutic approach emphasizes the importance of honoring both the losses and the gains that come with significant life changes. Like Persephone learning to value both her time in the world above and her role in the underworld, people in transition learn to appreciate what they have gained through their experiences while still acknowledging what they have lost. The seasonal aspect of her myth provides a particularly useful framework for understanding the cyclical nature of healing and growth. Just as Persephone's returns to the underworld are not signs of regression but necessary parts of her larger role, people in recovery learn to understand that periods of difficulty or withdrawal are not setbacks but integral parts of their ongoing development. This cyclical understanding helps people develop more realistic expectations about the process of personal growth. They learn that transformation doesn't happen in a straight line but involves repeated cycles of advance and retreat, integration and reflection, expansion and consolidation. Like the seasons themselves, these cycles serve necessary functions in the overall process of development. As Persephone's influence spreads throughout the ancient world and beyond, her story becomes a touchstone for anyone seeking to understand the deeper patterns that govern human experience. Her example provides reassurance that even the most difficult circumstances can become sources of wisdom and strength, that apparent endings can be new beginnings in disguise, and that the most profound transformations often come through experiences we would never have chosen for ourselves. Her legacy suggests that the goal of existence is not to avoid change and challenge, but to engage with them consciously and courageously. Like Persephone learning to find meaning and purpose in both her roles, people who follow her example learn to see their various life experiences not as separate and disconnected events, but as parts of a larger pattern of growth and development. This integrated understanding of life's complexities makes Persephone particularly relevant to modern people who must navigate rapid social and technological changes. Her story provides a template for maintaining personal identity while adapting to new circumstances, for finding continuity amid disruption, and for discovering sources of meaning that transcend immediate circumstances. Her dual nature also offers guidance for those trying to balance competing demands and responsibilities. Just as she learned to be both the dutiful daughter to Demeter and the capable queen to Hades, modern people can find in her example strategies for honoring different aspects of their identities without losing their essential sense of self. The wisdom traditions that grew up around her worship continue to influence contemporary spiritual and philosophical practices. Meditation techniques that involve conscious descent into darker aspects of experience draw on her model of finding light within darkness. Therapeutic approaches that emphasize the integration of shadow aspects of personality reflect her understanding of the necessity of embracing all aspects of existence. Environmental movements find inspiration in her role as a goddess who bridges the realms of growth and decay, recognizing that healthy ecosystems require both flourishing life and natural death and decomposition. Her example encourages a more nuanced understanding of humanity's relationship with the natural world, one that honors both our need for growth and development and our responsibility to accept the limits and cycles that govern all existence. What aspect of nature do you find most comforting during difficult times? For me, it has to be the way seasons change gradually, showing that even dramatic transformations can happen one small step at a time. There's something reassuring about nature's patient rhythms. As her story continues to resonate across cultures and centuries, Persephone remains a powerful symbol of the human capacity for growth, adaptation, and transformation. Her journey from innocent maiden to wise queen provides a map for anyone facing major life transitions, while her ongoing role as a bridge between different realms offers guidance for those seeking to integrate apparently contradictory aspects of their experience. Her example suggests that the most meaningful life is one that embraces the full spectrum of existence, light and darkness, growth and dormancy, joy and sorrow, beginning and ending. By following her model of conscious engagement with all aspects of experience, people can find sources of wisdom and strength that remain hidden to those who seek only pleasure and avoid all difficulty. The pomegranate seeds that bound her to the underworld become, in this understanding, not symbols of entrapment but of conscious choice to embrace a fuller, more complete existence. Like Persephone learning to see her divided life not as a punishment but as an opportunity to serve both the world of the living and the realm of the dead, people who follow her example learn to see their own complex circumstances as opportunities for growth and service rather than burdens to be endured. Her relationship with Hades, evolving from abduction to partnership, provides a model for transforming even the most difficult relationships into sources of mutual growth and understanding. While the original circumstances of their union remain problematic, the way they learn to work together for the good of both their realms suggests possibilities for healing and redemption that extend beyond individual circumstances to influence cosmic harmony. This larger significance of their partnership, its role in maintaining the balance between life and death, growth and rest, expansion and consolidation, reminds us that individual relationships and personal growth are connected to larger patterns and purposes. What seems like purely private experience actually contributes to the ongoing work of maintaining harmony and balance in the world. Persephone's story ultimately reveals that the deepest wisdom comes from learning to see connections rather than divisions, to understand how apparent opposites actually complement and support each other, and to recognize that the most profound transformations occur through embracing rather than avoiding the full complexity of existence. Her journey from the sunlit meadows of her youth to the shadowed depths of the underworld and back again, repeated endlessly through the cycles of seasons, provides a pattern for understanding how growth occurs through the integration of different kinds of experience. Like the earth itself, which must experience the dormancy of winter in order to produce the abundance of spring, human consciousness develops through cycles of expansion and consolidation, adventure and reflection, engagement and withdrawal. This cyclical understanding offers comfort to those facing difficult periods in their lives, reminding them that darkness and difficulty are not permanent conditions but necessary parts of larger patterns of growth and renewal. Just as winter is not the enemy of spring but its essential precursor, challenging experiences are not obstacles to happiness but ingredients in the development of wisdom and compassion. The enduring power of Persephone's story lies in its ability to transform our understanding of what might otherwise seem like purely negative experiences. Through her example, we learn to see abduction as potential initiation, separation as opportunity for growth, and even the prospect of death as transformation rather than ending. This transformation of perspective doesn't minimize the reality of suffering or loss, but it does suggest that even the most difficult circumstances contain the potential for unexpected gifts. Like Persephone discovering that her role as queen of the underworld allowed her to offer comfort and guidance to souls in transition, we may find that our own challenging experiences give us unique abilities to help others facing similar difficulties. The ancient Greeks who developed and preserved her story understood something profound about the nature of human existence. That meaning comes not from avoiding difficulty, but from finding ways to transform suffering into wisdom, isolation into deeper connection with others, and apparent endings into new beginnings. This understanding becomes particularly relevant in times of rapid change and uncertainty, when familiar structures and expectations are being challenged or overthrown. Persephone's example suggests that such periods, however disorienting and frightening they may be, often contain the seeds of necessary growth and renewal. Her story encourages us to look for the hidden possibilities within our current circumstances, however challenging they may appear. just as she learned to find beauty in the austere magnificence of the underworld and to discover sources of meaning in her unexpected role as guide for the dead, we too can learn to recognize opportunities for growth and service that might not be immediately apparent. The key insight from her myth is that transformation requires us to be willing to release our attachment to how we think things should be and to remain open to the unexpected ways that meaning and purpose might emerge from our experiences. This doesn't mean passively accepting whatever happens to us, but rather maintaining an active engagement with our circumstances while remaining flexible about the forms that growth and fulfillment might take. Her annual returns to the world above, bringing with her the wisdom gained in the underworld, remind us that no experience is truly isolated or meaningless. What we learn in our most difficult moments can become sources of insight and compassion that benefit not only ourselves but also others who encounter similar challenges. This integration of experience, the ability to find connections between different phases and aspects of life, becomes a hallmark of the kind of wisdom that Persephone embodies. Rather than compartmentalizing her existence into separate roles, she learns to see how her experiences in each realm inform and enrich her understanding of the other. As you contemplate the full scope of Persephone's story, from her innocent beginnings as Kore, the maiden, to her mature wisdom as queen of both the living and the dead, you begin to understand why her myth has remained relevant across so many centuries and cultures. Her journey maps onto universal human experiences of loss, adaptation, growth, and the search for meaning, while her ultimate integration of apparently contradictory roles provides a model for living fully and consciously in a complex world. The fragrance of pomegranate seeds still lingers in the air around her, a reminder of the conscious choice that transformed what began as abduction into a destiny that serves the cosmic order. The flowers in her hair change with the seasons, sometimes the bright blooms of spring, sometimes the darker beauties of the underworld, but always present as symbols of her connection to the ongoing cycles of growth and renewal. In her eyes, you can see the depth that comes from having witnessed both the joy of new life and the dignity of death, the innocence that cherishes each moment of beauty and the wisdom that understands the necessity of endings. She has become something unprecedented, a goddess who belongs fully to both the world of the living and the realm of the dead, who serves as a bridge between different states of existence and who demonstrates that the most profound transformations often come through experiences we would never have chosen for ourselves. Her story continues to unfold with each passing season, each cycle of death and rebirth, each individual who finds in her example the courage to face their own journeys of transformation. She remains eternally both maiden and queen, daughter and wife, goddess of spring flowers and ruler of the dead, embodying the truth that the deepest wisdom comes from learning to hold apparent contradictions in creative tension rather than trying to resolve them through choosing one side over another. As the pomegranate seeds she ate so long ago continue to bind her to the underworld, while the flowers of her youth connect her to the world above, Persephone demonstrates that true freedom comes not from avoiding all constraints, but from finding ways to transform even the most limiting circumstances into sources of meaning, growth, and service to the larger patterns that govern existence itself. And so her story becomes not just an explanation for the changing seasons, but a guide for anyone seeking to understand how to live fully and consciously in a world where joy and sorrow, growth and loss, beginning and ending are forever intertwined in the eternal dance of existence. Through her example, we learn that wisdom comes not from choosing light over darkness or life over death, but from embracing the full spectrum of existence with consciousness, courage, and compassion. In the end, Persephone's greatest teaching may be that transformation is always possible, that even the most difficult circumstances can become gateways to unexpected wisdom and strength, and that the most meaningful life is one that serves not just our own desires, but the larger patterns of balance and harmony that sustain all existence. Her journey from innocent maiden to wise queen continues to illuminate the path for all who seek to transform their own experiences of loss and change into sources of wisdom, compassion, and service to the greater good. As you drift deeper into this ancient story, there comes a moment that deserves our closest attention. A single act that changed the course of divine history and created the very rhythm by which our world still turns. Let us examine more closely that pivotal moment when Persephone raised the pomegranate to her lips and made a choice that would bind her to two realms forever. The pomegranate that Hades offered was no ordinary fruit, and the moment Persephone accepted it was no simple gesture of hospitality. You must understand that in the ancient world, the act of sharing food carried profound symbolic weight. It created bonds that transcended mere politeness and entered the realm of sacred obligation. When you ate at someone's table, you became part of their household in ways that went far beyond the physical act of consumption. But this particular fruit carried even deeper significance. The pomegranate, with its tough outer shell hiding hundreds of ruby-red seeds, had been a symbol of fertility and abundance for millennia before Persephone's story was first told. Each seed represented potential life, the promise of new growth, the continuation of cycles that stretched back to the beginning of time itself. You can picture the fruit in Hades's hands, larger than any pomegranate that grows in mortal orchards, its skin burnished to a deep red that seems to glow with inner fire. When he breaks it open, the seeds within sparkle like garnets, each one perfect in its symmetry, each one containing within itself the essence of life and death intertwined. The juice that flows from these seeds is darker than blood, sweeter than honey, and when it touches Persephone's lips, you can sense that she tastes not just the fruit itself, but all the complexities of existence it represents. There is sweetness, yes, but also an underlying tartness that speaks of knowledge hard won. There is nourishment, but also a subtle bitterness that hints at the price of wisdom. As she bites down on the first seed, you witness something extraordinary, not the trap that some interpretations suggest, but the first conscious choice Persephone has made since her abduction began. For the first time since Hades swept her away from that sunlit meadow, she is acting rather than merely reacting, choosing rather than simply enduring. What moment in your life felt like the biggest turning point? For me, it has to be those decisions we make instinctively, without fully understanding their consequences. There's something profound about how our deepest choices often happen in the space between thought and action. The first seed is an exploration. Persephone testing the boundaries of her new reality, discovering what it means to partake of the sustenance of the underworld. The second seed is consideration, her mind beginning to process the implications of what she is doing, the laws she is invoking, the bonds she is creating. By the third seed, she is making a statement not to Hades, not to the cosmos, but to herself. She is declaring that she will not remain a passive victim of circumstances beyond her control, but will find ways to exercise agency even within the constraints that have been placed upon her. The fourth seed carries the weight of acceptance, not resignation, but the kind of mature acknowledgement that comes when we recognize that fighting against unchangeable circumstances only brings suffering, while working within them might lead to unexpected possibilities. The fifth seed represents integration. Persephone beginning to understand that her identity need not be divided between her roles as maiden and queen, but can encompass both in ways that make her more complete rather than less. And the sixth seed. The sixth seed is pure choice. By this point, she knows exactly what she is doing, understands completely the consequences of her actions, and chooses to eat it anyway. This is not naivety or manipulation, but the conscious decision of a goddess who has recognized that her power lies not in avoiding difficult circumstances, but in transforming them into sources of strength and meaning. The juice of these seeds doesn't just stain her lips, it rewrites the fundamental structure of her being. She becomes, in that moment, something unprecedented in the cosmic order, a deity who belongs equally to the realm of life and the domain of death, who can move between worlds not as a visitor, but as a native of both. This transformation manifests in subtle but profound ways. Her eyes, once the clear blue of spring skies, now hold depths that reflect both the brightness of growing things and the dark wisdom of the underworld. Her voice, once pure as morning bird song, now carries undertones that speak of mysteries too profound for simple words. When she moves, you can see both the lightness of the maiden who once danced through meadows and the measured grace of a queen who has learned to navigate the complexities of divine politics. When she speaks, her words carry the authority of someone who has witnessed both birth and death, who understands the connections between beginnings and endings in ways that few beings in all creation can claim. The pomegranate juice becomes part of her blood, carrying with it not just the obligation to return to the underworld for 6 months of each year, but the capacity to serve as a bridge between realms that had previously been separated by an unbridgeable gulf. She gains the ability to understand the language of growing things because she has also learned to communicate with the spirits of the dead. This dual nature makes her invaluable as a mediator in disputes that involve both life and death. When questions arise about the proper timing of someone's passage from the world above to the realm below, her perspective proves essential. She can evaluate not just what someone has accomplished in life, but also what their death might contribute to the larger patterns of existence. The seeds also grant her a form of immortality that is different from the eternal youth enjoyed by most Olympian deities. Persephone's immortality is cyclical. She experiences a kind of death and rebirth with each transition between her two realms, gaining with each cycle a deeper understanding of what it means to exist in the space between different states of being. But perhaps most importantly, the pomegranate seeds transform her relationship with time itself. While other gods experience eternity as an endless present moment, Persephone learns to perceive time as a series of interconnected cycles, each ending containing the seed of a new beginning, each beginning carrying within it the memory of what came before. This temporal awareness makes her an invaluable advisor to both mortals and immortals who are struggling with change and transition. She can help them understand that their current circumstances, however difficult, are temporary phases in larger patterns of development and growth. The ancient Greeks who told her story understood something profound about the nature of commitment and transformation. They recognized that the deepest changes in our lives often come not from external forces acting upon us, but from moments when we choose to embrace new possibilities, even when those choices involve risk and uncertainty. Persephone's consumption of the pomegranate seeds represents a template for conscious participation in our own transformation. Rather than remaining passive victims of change, we can choose to engage actively with new circumstances, to find ways to maintain our essential identity while adapting to different realities. This understanding of transformation as a collaborative process between external circumstances and conscious choice has influenced countless generations of seekers and philosophers. They recognize in Persephone's example a model for maintaining personal agency even when life takes unexpected turns. The pomegranate itself becomes a recurring symbol in art and literature, representing not just fertility and abundance, but the complex relationship between choice and destiny. Artists depict the fruit in scenes of transition and transformation, using its rich red color and multitude of seeds to suggest the complexity and richness that can emerge from apparent loss. As you contemplate the profound implications of this single act, 6 pomegranate seeds consumed in a moment of conscious choice, you begin to understand why Persephone's story has resonated so deeply across cultures and centuries. Her decision represents something universal about the human experience of growth through difficulty, of finding power through acceptance, of discovering that our greatest transformations often come through embracing what we initially resist. Now let us turn our attention to a comparison that illuminates the different ways divine feminine power can manifest in the world. You have witnessed Persephone's transformation from innocent maiden to wise queen, but her story gains additional depth when considered alongside that of another powerful goddess who also bore the title of queen. Hera, queen of the heavens, wife of Zeus, represents one model of divine feminine power. The traditional role of the wife who gains status through marriage but must constantly struggle to maintain her position in the face of her husband's infidelities and political machinations. Her story is one of jealousy, revenge, and the endless effort to control circumstances that seem perpetually beyond her influence. You can see Hera in her magnificent palace on Mount Olympus, seated on a throne of gold and ivory, wearing a crown that catches the light of eternal flames. She is beautiful beyond mortal comprehension, possessed of a majesty that makes even other gods bow in her presence. Yet for all her outward magnificence, there is something brittle about her power, something that requires constant vigilance to maintain. Her marriage to Zeus began with deception and coercion. Zeus transformed himself into a pitiful, rain-soaked cuckoo to gain her sympathy, and when she took pity on the bird and held it to her breast, he resumed his true form and took her by force. This inauspicious beginning set the pattern for their entire relationship, Zeus exercising power through deception and force, Hera responding with schemes and punishments directed not at her husband but at his various lovers and children. In contrast, consider Persephone's relationship with Hades. While it also began with abduction, it evolved into something unprecedented in Greek mythology. A marriage between equals, a partnership where both parties contribute their unique strengths to shared responsibilities. Where Hera's power is reactive, constantly responding to Zeus's actions, Persephone's power is proactive, helping to shape the very structure of existence through her conscious choices. You can observe this difference in how they handle challenges to their authority. When mortals or other deities question Hera's position, she responds with swift and often brutal punishment, transforming rivals into animals, cursing them with madness, or engineering their destruction through elaborate schemes. Her power is expressed primarily through the ability to inflict suffering on those who displease her. Persephone, by contrast, tends to respond to challenges with wisdom and measured judgment. When Orpheus descended to the underworld seeking to reclaim Eurydice, Persephone did not see this as an affront to her authority, but as an opportunity to demonstrate compassion and understanding. She was moved by his music and his devotion, and it was largely through her influence that Hades agreed to give the young musician a chance to succeed. Which approach to leadership do you find more effective, power through fear or power through wisdom? For me, it has to be the kind of authority that inspires rather than intimidates. There's something compelling about leaders who make others want to follow them rather than forcing compliance. This difference in their approaches to power reflects deeper distinctions in their understanding of what it means to be a queen. Hera's queenship is defined by her relationship to Zeus. She is queen because she is his wife, and her status depends entirely on maintaining that connection. This dependence creates a fundamental vulnerability that her enemies can exploit and that she must constantly guard against. Persephone's queenship, while it also derives from marriage, is grounded in her own abilities and achievements. She doesn't rule the underworld simply because she is Hades' wife. She rules because she has proven herself capable of the wisdom, compassion, and judgment that the role requires. Her authority grows from her competence rather than from her marital status alone. This difference becomes particularly apparent in how they relate to other female deities. Hera views most other goddesses as potential rivals or threats, leading to complex webs of alliances and enmities based primarily on perceived challenges to her position. Persephone, by contrast, tends to form relationships based on mutual respect and shared interests rather than competitive positioning. Her friendship with Artemis, for example, develops naturally from their shared appreciation for the natural world and their mutual respect for each other's independence and capabilities. With Athena, she finds common ground in their roles as wise counselors who help others navigate complex challenges. These relationships enhance rather than threaten her position as queen. The physical representations of these two queens also reveal important differences in their approaches to power. Hera is typically depicted in elaborate robes and jewelry that emphasize her status and wealth. Her appearance is designed to inspire awe and remind others of her exalted position. Her beauty is formal and somewhat intimidating, perfect but not particularly approachable. Persephone's appearance, while equally magnificent, tends to be more nuanced and complex. In the world above, she appears as the radiant maiden crowned with flowers, approachable and warm. In the underworld, her beauty becomes more austere and mysterious, but never cold or forbidding. She manages to maintain accessibility even while commanding respect. Their different relationships with power also manifest in how they handle their husband's other relationships and responsibilities. Hera's jealousy of Zeus's many affairs and illegitimate children creates constant conflict and instability in the divine realm. Her attempts to punish his lovers and children often backfire, creating new enemies and complicating already difficult situations. Persephone's approach to similar challenges is markedly different. She doesn't compete with Hades's other responsibilities or relationships, but finds ways to integrate them into a larger pattern of harmony and cooperation. When disputes arise in the underworld, she works with her husband to find solutions that serve justice rather than personal preference. This collaborative approach extends to their shared rule of the underworld. Rather than creating separate spheres of influence that might lead to competition or conflict, they develop complementary roles that enhance each other's effectiveness. Hades handles the administrative and legal aspects of ruling the dead, while Persephone focuses on the emotional and spiritual support that souls need during their transition. The contrast between these two models of queenship provides insight into different ways that power can be exercised and maintained. Hera represents the traditional model where authority comes from external sources and must be defended against constant challenges. This approach tends to create adversarial relationships and requires enormous energy to maintain. Persephone embodies a newer model where authority develops from internal sources: wisdom, competence, compassion, and the ability to serve the greater good. This approach tends to create collaborative relationships and becomes stronger over time rather than requiring constant maintenance. Their different approaches to motherhood also illuminate these contrasting models of feminine power. Hera's relationships with her children are complicated by her conflicts with Zeus and her need to maintain her position. Her children become pawns in larger political games rather than relationships she can enjoy for their own sake. Persephone's relationship with the role of motherhood is more complex. She doesn't have biological children in the traditional sense, but she becomes a mother figure to countless souls who pass through the underworld. Her nurturing instincts find expression in caring for those who are vulnerable and in need of guidance during one of life's most challenging transitions. This difference suggests that there are many ways to express maternal energy, and that the most fulfilling approach might be the one that aligns with our particular strengths and circumstances, rather than conforming to external expectations about what motherhood should look like. The lasting legacies of these two queens also reveal important distinctions. Hera's influence on subsequent mythology and culture tends to reinforce traditional gender roles and power structures. She becomes a symbol of the jealous wife, the woman who must compete with other women for male attention, the queen whose power depends entirely on her relationship with her husband. Persephone's legacy suggests alternative possibilities for feminine power and authority. She becomes a symbol of transformation, of the ability to find strength through adaptation, of leadership that serves the greater good rather than personal ambition. Her example encourages women to develop their own sources of authority rather than depending entirely on relationships with powerful men. These different models remain relevant in contemporary discussions about power, leadership, and gender roles. The choice between reactive and proactive approaches to authority, between competitive and collaborative relationship styles, between external and internal sources of validation, these remain central challenges in both personal and professional contexts. As you consider these two powerful goddesses and their contrasting approaches to queenship, you begin to understand why Persephone's story has inspired so many people across centuries and cultures. Her example suggests that it's possible to find sources of power and authority that don't require us to diminish others, that grow stronger through use rather than weaker, and that contribute to the greater good rather than serving only personal interests. But to truly understand the depth and complexity of Persephone's story, we must also examine it from the perspective of the goddess whose grief literally changed the world. Demeter's response to her daughter's disappearance provides one of mythology's most powerful explorations of maternal love and the lengths to which a mother will go to protect her child. Picture Demeter in the moments after she first discovers that Persephone is missing. The immediate shift from contentment to concern, from concern to worry, from worry to panic, and finally to the kind of desperation that can move mountains and stop rivers in their courses. This is not the controlled response of a deity acting according to cosmic plan, but the raw, primal reaction of a mother who has lost her child. You can feel the earth itself responding to her distress. The flowers that had been blooming in abundance begin to droop their heads. The grain that had been growing tall and golden starts to wither in the fields. Trees shed their leaves out of season, and the very air grows thin and cold as Demeter's life-giving energy is consumed by her grief and panic. Her search begins with the methodical thoroughness of someone who refuses to believe that her daughter could truly be gone. She checks every grove where Persephone liked to gather flowers, every stream where she might have stopped to drink, every cave where she might have sought shelter. She questions every nymph and river god, every minor deity who might have witnessed something unusual. But as hours turn to days and days stretch into weeks, Demeter's search becomes increasingly frantic. She abandons her usual dignity and composure, wandering the earth with her hair unbound and her robes torn, calling Persephone's name until her voice becomes hoarse with desperation. The effect of her distress on the mortal world grows more severe with each passing day. Crops that should have been approaching harvest time instead turn brown and crumble to dust. Fruit trees that should have been heavy with produce stand bare and lifeless. Even the wild plants that normally require no tending begin to die as Demeter's attention turns entirely to her search. What's the longest you've ever searched for something you lost? For me, it has to be those times when something truly important goes missing and you keep looking in the same places over and over, unable to accept that it's really gone. There's something heartbreaking about that kind of desperate hope. As the agricultural disaster spreads, mortals begin to face starvation on a scale never before witnessed. The stored grain from previous harvests runs out, and there is no new growth to replace it. Cattle and sheep grow thin and die as the grasslands turn to dust. Even fish begin to disappear from streams and lakes as the natural cycles that sustain all life are disrupted by Demeter's grief. The prayers of desperate mortals rise to Mount Olympus like smoke from 1,000 altars, but the other gods find themselves unable to restore the natural order. Without Demeter's active participation, the earth remains barren and lifeless. They begin to realize that the goddess of the harvest is not merely one deity among many, but the foundation upon which all mortal life depends. Zeus initially tries to ignore the crisis, hoping that Demeter will eventually accept the fait accompli of Persephone's marriage and return to her duties. But as the death toll among mortals begins to mount, and as other gods start to feel the effects of the reduction in worship and sacrifices, he realizes that he must take action. His first attempts to resolve the situation are characteristically high-handed and insensitive. He sends messengers to Demeter offering her honors and privileges if she will end her strike and restore fertility to the earth. These overtures are met with contempt. What use are additional titles and responsibilities to a mother who has lost her child? Demeter's response to these diplomatic initiatives reveals the depth of her transformation from nurturing mother goddess to avenging force of nature. She has moved beyond grief into something harder and more implacable, a determination that if she cannot have her daughter back, then no one will benefit from the life-giving powers that are hers to bestow. This is not mere petulance or spite, but a profound reordering of her priorities. For countless ages, she had devoted her energies to sustaining and nurturing life, asking nothing in return but the satisfaction of seeing things grow and flourish. Now she has discovered that even goddesses can lose what is most precious to them, and that the cosmic order she had served so faithfully offers no protection for the things that matter most. Her strike against the natural world becomes a form of protest against the fundamental injustices built into the structure of existence itself. If daughters can be stolen from their mothers without consequence, if the powerful can take what they want from the powerless without regard for the suffering they cause, then why should she continue to support a system that permits such cruelties? The barren landscape that results from her withdrawal becomes a physical manifestation of her emotional state, the external world reflecting the wasteland that grief has created in her heart. Every withered plant, every empty field, every dying animal serves as testimony to the depth of her loss and the intensity of her protest. As the crisis deepens, you can see the other gods beginning to understand that this is not a temporary tantrum that will resolve itself with time. Demeter has the power to maintain this strike indefinitely, and her will to do so shows no signs of weakening. If anything, her resolve seems to strengthen as she watches the consequences of her actions spread throughout the mortal world. The irony of the situation is not lost on her. In order to save countless mortal mothers from losing their children to starvation, Zeus must return her own child to her. Her willingness to allow widespread suffering in service of her personal goal might seem callous, but it reflects a hard-won understanding that sometimes extreme measures are necessary to challenge entrenched systems of power and privilege. The moment when Helios finally reveals the truth about Persephone's fate represents a crucial turning point in Demeter's emotional journey. Learning that her daughter has been abducted rather than killed provides relief mixed with a new kind of anguish. Relief that Persephone is alive, but anguish at the realization that the abduction was sanctioned by Zeus himself. This revelation transforms her grief into rage, not the hot, explosive anger that burns out quickly, but the cold, sustained fury of someone who has been fundamentally betrayed by those she trusted most. She now understands that Persephone's disappearance was not a random tragedy, but a calculated political move designed to strengthen Zeus's power by creating an alliance with his brother Hades. The knowledge that she was excluded from these negotiations, that her consent was not even sought for a decision that would tear apart her life and Persephone's, adds insult to the injury of loss. She realizes that in the eyes of the other gods, she and her daughter are not autonomous individuals deserving of respect, but assets to be deployed in service of larger strategic goals. This understanding gives her strike new meaning and purpose. What had begun as the desperate action of a grief-stricken mother becomes a conscious act of rebellion against a patriarchal system that treats women and their relationships as expendable. Her willingness to maintain the agricultural disaster becomes a statement that such treatment will not be accepted without consequences. The negotiations that eventually lead to Persephone's partial return reveal the complex dynamics of power and relationship that govern the divine realm. Zeus cannot simply order Hades to return Persephone, both because Hades is his equal as ruler of his own domain and because the marriage has been consummated according to divine law. But neither can he allow Demeter's strike to continue indefinitely without facing the collapse of the entire system that depends on mortal worship and sacrifice. The compromise that emerges. Persephone spending part of each year with each parent satisfies no one completely but prevents total disaster. Demeter must accept that she cannot have her daughter back full-time. Hades must accept that his wife will leave him for half of each year, and Persephone must accept a life divided between two realms and two very different sets of responsibilities. But the compromise also creates something new and unprecedented, a cyclical pattern that will govern the natural world for all time, with Demeter's joy at Persephone's return creating spring and summer, and her sorrow at each departure bringing autumn and winter. Her maternal emotions become encoded into the very structure of earthly existence. This transformation of personal grief into cosmic rhythm represents one of mythology's most profound insights about the relationship between individual experience and universal patterns. Demeter's loss and recovery become everyone's loss and recovery, repeated endlessly through the cycle of seasons. The agricultural knowledge that develops from this myth extends far beyond simple seasonal awareness into sophisticated understanding of natural cycles and their relationship to human activity. Farmers learn to see their work as participation in Demeter's eternal cycle of joy and sorrow, planting during her happy time and allowing fields to rest during her period of mourning. But perhaps most importantly, Demeter's story provides a model for understanding how personal suffering can be transformed into forces that serve the greater good. Her grief doesn't simply disappear when Persephone returns, it becomes part of the natural order, giving meaning and structure to experiences that might otherwise seem random and chaotic. The maternal love that drives Demeter's actions becomes a template for understanding the fierce protectiveness that can motivate parents to extraordinary actions. Her willingness to challenge the entire cosmic order for her daughter's sake demonstrates the power of love to create change, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. This aspect of the myth resonates particularly strongly with anyone who has experienced the protective instincts that parenthood awakens. The recognition that there are some things, some people for whom we would risk everything, challenge any authority, make any sacrifice, speaks to fundamental truths about human nature and the bonds that connect us to one another. As you contemplate Demeter's journey from contented mother to grief-stricken searcher to powerful agent of cosmic change, you begin to understand another dimension of Persephone's story, how individual transformation ripples outward to affect entire communities and ultimately the structure of existence itself. Now let us explore one of the most mysterious and influential aspects of Persephone's legacy, the secret religious cult that developed around her story and promised initiates a transformed understanding of death and what lies beyond it. The Eleusinian Mysteries, practiced for nearly 2,000 years, represented the ancient world's most important attempt to use Persephone's example as a guide for confronting mortality and finding hope in the face of the ultimate unknown. The sanctuary at Eleusis, located about 14 miles from Athens, became the most sacred site in the Greek world, a place where thousands of pilgrims came each year to participate in secret rituals that promised to change their relationship with death forever. The mysteries celebrated there were so sacred that revealing their contents was punishable by death, and even today, despite centuries of scholarly investigation, their exact nature remains largely unknown. What we do know is that the ceremonies centered on Persephone's story, using her journey between the worlds of the living and the dead as a template for the spiritual transformation that awaited those who were properly initiated. Participants underwent a carefully orchestrated experience designed to recreate key elements of her myth while providing personal insights into the nature of existence and the continuity of consciousness beyond physical death. You can imagine yourself among the crowds of pilgrims who made their way to Eleusis each September at the time when Persephone was beginning her descent to the underworld and Demeter's sorrow was bringing the first hints of autumn to the Greek landscape. The timing was deliberate. Initiates experienced the mysteries during the season that most powerfully evoked themes of death, loss, and the promise of eventual renewal. The journey to Eleusis itself was part of the transformative process. Pilgrims walked the sacred way from Athens, following a route that took them through landscapes that grew progressively more rural and wild as they left the civilized world behind and approached the liminal space where the boundaries between different levels of reality became thin and permeable. Along the way, they participated in purification rituals designed to prepare them for what lay ahead. They bathed in the sea to wash away the accumulated spiritual impurities of ordinary life, fasted to empty themselves of mundane concerns, and maintained strict silence to create the internal stillness necessary for receiving profound revelations. The actual ceremonies took place over several days and nights, beginning with public rituals that all could witness, and gradually progressing to increasingly secret and sacred experiences reserved only for those who had undergone proper preparation. The public ceremonies recreated elements of Demeter's search for her daughter, with participants joining in lamentations and expressions of grief that acknowledged the reality of loss and separation. But the true power of the mysteries lay in what happened during the secret nighttime ceremonies conducted in the inner sanctum of the temple. Here, initiates experienced something that fundamentally changed their understanding of death and what lay beyond it. Ancient accounts speak of visions so powerful that they eliminated fear of death, of revelations so profound that they provided certainty about the continuity of consciousness after bodily dissolution. What form of spiritual experience would most profoundly change your relationship with mortality? For me, it has to be anything that provides direct experience rather than just intellectual understanding. There's something about knowing versus believing that transforms everything. The centerpiece of these secret rituals appears to have been a dramatic reenactment of key moments from Persephone's story, but presented in ways that allowed participants to experience them as personal rather than mythological events. Initiates may have been led through symbolic representations of abduction, descent into darkness, confrontation with death, and eventual return to light, all designed to provide direct experience of the death and rebirth cycle that Persephone embodied. The sacred drama likely culminated in the revelation of certain objects or symbols that provided visual confirmation of the truths that had been communicated through the experiential elements of the ceremony. These revelations were considered so sacred that even the briefest description of them was forbidden, but their impact on participants was reportedly profound and lasting. One of the most significant aspects of the mysteries was their egalitarian nature. Unlike most ancient religious practices, which were restricted by social class, gender, or ethnicity, the Eleusinian Mysteries were open to anyone who could speak Greek and had not committed murder. Slaves could be initiated alongside free citizens, women participated on equal terms with men, and foreigners were welcomed as readily as natives. This inclusivity reflected the universal relevance of Persephone's story and the democratic nature of death itself, the ultimate experience that awaits every human being regardless of their social status or personal circumstances. The mysteries taught that the transformative wisdom available through Persephone's example was the birthright of all humanity, not the privilege of a select few. The initiation process was structured in stages, with participants able to return in subsequent years for deeper levels of instruction and experience. The lesser mysteries, held each spring, provided basic preparation and purification. The greater mysteries, conducted each autumn, offered the full transformative experience to those who had completed the preliminary requirements. This graduated approach recognized that the kind of profound spiritual transformation promised by the mysteries couldn't be accomplished in a single experience, but required repeated engagement and deepening understanding over time. Like Persephone herself, who required multiple cycles of descent and return to fully integrate her dual nature, initiates needed multiple encounters with the sacred mysteries to fully absorb their implications. The influence of the Eleusinian Mysteries extended far beyond the ceremonies themselves into the daily lives and world views of those who participated in them. Initiates reported a fundamental shift in their relationship with mortality, not denial of death or false promises of physical immortality, but a deep conviction that consciousness continued beyond bodily death in ways that made the prospect less frightening and more meaningful. This transformation had practical effects on how initiates approached their remaining life. Free from the paralyzing fear of death that plagued many of their contemporaries, they were able to make choices based on wisdom and compassion rather than anxiety and self-preservation. They became known for their courage in facing difficulties, their generosity in helping others, and their serenity in confronting life's inevitable challenges. The agricultural symbolism that permeated the mysteries connected Persephone's personal story to the larger cycles of death and renewal that governed all existence. Participants learned to see their own lives as part of these eternal patterns, gaining comfort from the recognition that their individual deaths would contribute to the ongoing process of regeneration and growth. The grain of wheat became a central symbol in these teachings, a seed that must be buried in dark earth and undergo a form of death before it can sprout into new life. Initiates learn to see their own mortality through this lens, understanding that physical death might be not an ending but a necessary transition to a different form of existence. This agricultural metaphor was particularly powerful because it was based on observable natural processes that everyone could witness and understand. The mysteries didn't ask participants to believe in abstract theological concepts, but to recognize patterns that were already visible in the world around them and to understand their personal relevance to those larger rhythms. The psychological insights embedded in the mysteries were remarkably sophisticated, anticipating many concepts that wouldn't be formally developed until modern depth psychology emerged in the 20th century. The idea that consciousness could survive bodily death, that traumatic experiences could become sources of wisdom and strength, that apparent opposites like life and death were actually complementary aspects of a single process. These insights emerged from careful observation of the patterns embodied in Persephone's story. The therapeutic effects of participation in the mysteries were well documented by ancient observers. People who had struggled with depression, anxiety, or despair often found relief through the transformative experiences offered at Eleusis. The recognition that their personal suffering was part of larger patterns of meaning and purpose provided a framework for understanding and integrating difficult experiences. The mysteries also provided a model for healthy relationships with the unknown and unpredictable aspects of existence. Rather than encouraging participants to seek control over circumstances beyond their influence, the ceremonies taught acceptance of uncertainty combined with confidence that consciousness could navigate whatever challenges might arise. This approach to the unknown was particularly relevant to the experience of death, which represented the ultimate encounter with the unpredictable and uncontrollable. By providing direct experience of symbolic death and rebirth, the mysteries prepared participants for their eventual physical death with equanimity rather than terror. The influence of the Eleusinian Mysteries extended throughout the ancient world, affecting philosophy, literature, art, and politics. Many of the greatest figures of Greek and Roman civilization, including Plato, Cicero, and Marcus Aurelius, were initiates, and their works reflect the profound influence of the insights they gained at Eleusis. The philosophical traditions that developed from these influences emphasized the continuity of consciousness, the meaningful nature of suffering, and the importance of personal transformation through direct experience rather than mere intellectual understanding. These ideas became foundational elements in various wisdom traditions that continue to influence spiritual and philosophical thought today. The artistic representations inspired by the mysteries tended to emphasize themes of transformation, renewal, and the hidden connections between apparent opposites. The visual language developed for depicting Persephone, and her story became a rich symbolic vocabulary for expressing complex psychological and spiritual concepts. The decline of the mysteries in the early centuries of the Common Era, as Christianity became the dominant religion in the Mediterranean world, marked the end of one of humanity's most sophisticated attempts to use mythological wisdom for practical spiritual transformation. But the insights they preserved and transmitted continue to influence approaches to death, dying, and the search for meaning in contemporary culture. Modern researchers studying near-death experiences, consciousness studies, and thanatology often find remarkable parallels between their findings and the teachings that appear to have been central to the Eleusinian Mysteries. The idea that consciousness can exist independently of the physical body, that dying involves a process of transformation rather than simple extinction, and that direct spiritual experience provides more reliable knowledge than intellectual speculation. These concepts continue to emerge from contemporary investigations into the nature of consciousness and death. As you contemplate the profound influence of these ancient mysteries and their connection to Persephone's story, you begin to understand another dimension of her enduring significance. Her myth provided not just entertainment or explanation, but practical guidance for confronting the most fundamental challenges of human existence. Finally, let us examine Persephone in her full power and authority as Queen of the Underworld, moving beyond the focus on her relationship with Hades to explore her independent actions as a ruler, judge, and guardian of the cosmic order. Far from being merely a passive figure who happened to end up in the underworld, she becomes an active and influential force in her own right, wielding power with wisdom and compassion in ways that transform the very nature of death and what comes after. In her role as Queen of the Underworld, Persephone exercises authority over one of the most fundamental aspects of existence, the transition from life to death and the experiences that await consciousness after physical dissolution. This is not ceremonial power, but practical responsibility for ensuring that cosmic justice is maintained and that souls receive the treatment they have earned through their actions during life. You can observe her in the great halls of judgment, seated on a throne of polished obsidian beside Hades as they preside over the evaluation of newly arrived souls. But while Hades focuses on the legal and administrative aspects of these proceedings, ensuring that proper procedures are followed and that sentences are carried out according to cosmic law, Persephone brings a different perspective to the process. Her contribution to these judicial proceedings reflects her unique understanding of both the world of the living and the realm of the dead. She can evaluate not just what someone did during their lifetime, but the circumstances and motivations that led to their actions. Her perspective as someone who has experienced both innocence and hard-won wisdom makes her particularly qualified to judge cases that involve moral complexity and ambiguity. When souls arrive who have committed terrible crimes but did so under extreme duress or because of circumstances beyond their control, Persephone's voice often proves decisive in ensuring that justice includes mercy and understanding. She recognizes that the simple application of rules, however fair those rules might be, sometimes fails to account for the full context of individual choices and actions. Her interventions in specific cases have become legendary throughout the underworld. When the soul of a woman who had killed her abusive husband appeared before the judges, it was Persephone who ensured that the full story was heard, not just the fact of the murder, but the years of suffering that had preceded it, the desperate circumstances that had left her with no other options, and the courage it had taken to finally act. In such cases, she doesn't override the requirements of cosmic justice, but ensures that those requirements are applied with full understanding of the complexity of mortal experience. She has learned that true justice must account not only for actions, but for the full context in which those actions occurred. Her influence extends beyond individual cases to the larger structures and systems that govern the underworld. She has established new institutions designed to help souls adapt to their post-mortem existence, recognizing that the transition from life to death can be traumatic and disorienting even for those who have lived exemplary lives. The most important of these innovations is the creation of what might be called orientation centers, spaces within the underworld where newly arrived souls can process their experiences, come to terms with their new situation, and prepare for whatever form their eternal existence will take. These centers are staffed by compassionate spirits who have been specially trained to provide comfort and guidance during this crucial transition period. What kind of support do you think would be most helpful during major life transitions? For me, it has to be having someone who understands what you're going through and can offer practical guidance along with emotional support. There's something invaluable about not having to figure everything out alone. Persephone herself often visits these centers, offering personal comfort to souls who are struggling with particularly difficult adjustments. Her presence provides reassurance that they have not been abandoned to navigate this transition alone, and her wisdom helps them understand that death is not punishment but transformation to a different form of existence. She pays particular attention to souls who died young or under tragic circumstances. Those who never had the chance to fully develop their potential during life, who were cut down by disease or violence or accident before they could complete their earthly journey. For these souls, she has created special programs designed to provide opportunities for continued growth and learning in the afterlife. Her work with these tragic cases reflects her deep understanding of the relationship between suffering and wisdom. She recognizes that souls who have experienced great difficulty during life often possess insights and compassion that can benefit others, and she finds ways to channel these hard-won gifts into service within the underworld community. The garden spaces she has created throughout her realm serve multiple purposes, providing beauty and serenity for souls who need healing, offering opportunities for contemplation and reflection, and creating gathering places where spirits can form new communities and relationships based on shared interests and mutual support. These gardens are unlike anything that exists in the world above, featuring plants that grow in eternal twilight and bloom with their own inner radiance. The flowers she cultivates there combine the beauty of earthly blooms with qualities that can only exist in the realm of the dead roses that carry the fragrance of cherished memories, lilies that glow with the light of accumulated wisdom, jasmine whose scent brings comfort to the grieving. Her role as a mediator in disputes between different factions within the underworld demonstrates her diplomatic skills and her commitment to maintaining harmony even among the dead. When conflicts arise between souls from different time periods who have difficulty understanding each other, between spirits who hold different beliefs about the nature of existence, between those who accept their situation and those who rebel against it, she works tirelessly to find solutions that honor all perspectives while maintaining overall order. One of her most challenging ongoing responsibilities involves managing the relationship between the underworld and the various heroes and adventurers who occasionally attempt to enter her domain while still alive. These intrusions could be seen as violations of the cosmic order that require swift punishment, but Persephone typically approaches them with curiosity about their motivations and willingness to help them achieve their goals if those goals are worthy. When Orpheus descended to reclaim Eurydice, Persephone was moved not by his musical skill alone, but by the depth of love that had motivated his dangerous journey. She recognized that his quest represented something profound about the human capacity for devotion and sacrifice, and she used her influence to convince Hades to grant his request despite the precedent it might set. When Heracles arrived to capture Cerberus as part of his 12 labors, Persephone ensured that he was treated as an honored guest rather than an intruder. She understood that his labors were part of a process of redemption and transformation, and she wanted to support rather than hinder his efforts to achieve heroic status. These interactions with living heroes who enter her realm provide opportunities for Persephone to serve as a bridge between the world of the living and the land of the dead in ways that go beyond her seasonal returns to the upper world. Through these encounters, she can send messages and insights back to the living world that help mortals understand the true nature of death and what lies beyond it. Her relationship with other deities who have connections to the underworld reveals additional dimensions of her authority and influence. When disputes arise between different gods about jurisdiction over souls or authority within her realm, she serves as the primary negotiator, using her diplomatic skills to find solutions that satisfy all parties while maintaining the integrity of the cosmic order. Her interactions with the Furies, ancient goddesses of vengeance who pursue those who have committed particularly heinous crimes, demonstrate her ability to work with even the most implacable forces of justice. While she respects their role in maintaining cosmic order, she also works to ensure that their pursuit of vengeance doesn't become excessive or counterproductive. In cases where the Furies' relentless pursuit has achieved its purpose and the targeted soul has genuinely repented and learned from their mistakes, Persephone sometimes intervenes to offer protection and the possibility of redemption. This doesn't negate the justice the Furies represent, but recognizes that the ultimate goal of cosmic justice is transformation and growth rather than endless punishment. Her work with the various categories of souls that inhabit different regions of the underworld shows her commitment to ensuring that everyone receives appropriate treatment based on their individual circumstances and needs. In the Elysian fields, she helps the blessed dead find meaningful ways to spend their eternal happiness. In the Asphodel Meadows, she works with ordinary souls to help them find peace and contentment in their twilight existence. Even in Tartarus, where the most wicked souls face punishment for their crimes, her influence can be felt in efforts to ensure that suffering serves a redemptive purpose rather than existing purely for its own sake. While she doesn't interfere with necessary punishments, she does work to create opportunities for genuine repentance and eventual rehabilitation when such possibilities exist. Her annual returns to the world above provide opportunities for her to gather information about changing conditions in the mortal realm and to adapt underworld policies and procedures accordingly. As human civilization evolves and new forms of moral complexity emerge, she ensures that the judgment and treatment of souls keeps pace with these developments. These updates to underworld policy reflect her understanding that justice must be dynamic rather than static, adapting to new circumstances while maintaining core principles of fairness and compassion. She recognizes that what constituted moral behavior in one era might not apply directly to a different time period, and she works to ensure that souls are judged according to the standards and possibilities that existed during their lifetimes. Her influence on the training and development of other underworld officials ensures that her approaches to justice and mercy are institutionalized rather than depending entirely on her personal involvement. She has established programs for educating the various spirits and minor deities who serve in administrative roles throughout her realm, ensuring that they understand and can apply the principles she has developed. These educational initiatives reflect her recognition that effective governance requires not just good intentions, but systematic approaches to ensuring that those intentions are translated into consistent practice. By training others to think and act according to her principles, she multiplies her influence and ensures that her innovations will survive and continue to develop even when she is absent from the underworld. Her work in developing new forms of artistic and cultural expression within the underworld demonstrates her understanding that souls need more than just justice and comfort. They also need opportunities for creativity, beauty, and meaningful engagement with others. The festivals and celebrations she has instituted provide occasions for joy and community even in the realm of the dead. These cultural innovations draw on traditions from all the different civilizations and time periods represented among the souls in her realm, creating new hybrid forms that honor diverse backgrounds while fostering unity and mutual understanding. The music, dance, poetry, and visual arts that flourish under her patronage provide evidence that creativity and beauty can exist even in the shadow of death. Her personal evolution from the innocent maiden core to the wise queen Persephone provides a template for understanding how authority and wisdom develop through experience and conscious choice. She didn't become an effective ruler simply by virtue of her marriage to Hades or her divine nature, but through her willingness to learn from her experiences and to use that learning in service of others. This developmental model suggests that true leadership emerges not from inherent qualities alone, but from the conscious decision to transform personal experience into wisdom that can benefit others. Her example encourages anyone in positions of authority to see their roles not as opportunities for personal aggrandizement, but as chances to serve the greater good. As your journey through Persephone's complete story draws to a close, you carry with you the understanding that she represents far more than a seasonal myth or a tale of divine romance. She embodies the possibility of transformation through adversity, the power of conscious choice in shaping destiny, and the potential for finding meaning and purpose even in the most challenging circumstances. Her story reminds us that the most profound growth often comes through experiences we would never have chosen for ourselves, that apparent endings can become new beginnings in disguise, and that the wisdom gained through difficulty can become a gift we offer to others who face similar challenges. The pomegranate seeds that bound her to the underworld become symbols not of entrapment, but of conscious participation in the larger patterns that govern existence. Her dual nature as maiden and queen, goddess of spring growth and autumn harvest, ruler of both life and death, demonstrates that wholeness comes not from avoiding contradiction, but from learning to integrate apparently opposite aspects of experience. Her example suggests that each of us has the capacity to transform our own difficult experiences into sources of wisdom and service, to find ways to bridge different aspects of our lives and identities, and to contribute to the ongoing work of creating justice, beauty, and meaning in whatever realm we inhabit. As the seasons continue their eternal cycle, as spring follows winter and death gives way to new life, Persephone's story continues to unfold, offering guidance and inspiration to all who seek to understand the deeper patterns that connect individual experience to cosmic purpose. But wait, dear dreamers, our journey into Persephone's realm is not yet complete. As you rest more deeply into this ancient story, there are still deeper mysteries to explore, hidden layers of meaning that reveal themselves only to those willing to venture further into the shadows and emerge with profound understanding. Let us descend together into even more secret chambers of wisdom, where the most transformative truths about this goddess and her eternal story await. To truly understand Persephone's transformation from innocent maiden to powerful queen, we must examine her journey through the lens of one of the most profound insights into human psychology, the concept of the shadow self, that part of our nature we often prefer to ignore or deny, but which contains essential aspects of our wholeness. You must understand that when Kor was abducted and taken to the underworld, she was not simply being transported from one physical location to another. She was being forced to confront aspects of existence and aspects of herself that her previous life of eternal spring and innocent joy had never required her to face. This was an encounter with what the great psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow, those parts of the psyche that we typically push away because they seem incompatible with our idealized self-image. Picture Kori in her early life as the embodiment of everything bright and beautiful in existence. She was the eternal maiden, forever young, forever innocent, forever surrounded by light and growth and the endless renewal of spring. Her world was one of perpetual bloom, where every day brought new flowers, every season was harvest time, and death was something that happened to others in distant places, far from her protected realm. But this existence, however beautiful, was incomplete. It was a life that had never been tested by loss, never deepened by sorrow, never strengthened by the necessity of making difficult choices. Corey's innocence, while lovely, was the innocence of someone who had never encountered the full spectrum of what it means to exist in a universe where light and darkness, joy and sorrow, life and death are inextricably intertwined. When Hades emerged from the earth to claim her, he was not just abducting a goddess, he was serving as the agent of a necessary psychological and spiritual integration. The underworld he took her to represented everything that had been missing from her conscious experience, the realm of endings, of hidden knowledge, of the deep unconscious processes that govern existence from beneath the surface of awareness. You can imagine Corey's terror during those first days in the underworld, not just at finding herself in an alien environment, but at discovering aspects of reality and aspects of herself that she had never suspected existed. The maiden, who had known only growth and light, was suddenly confronted with decay and darkness, with the knowledge that everything she had taken for granted was part of a larger cycle that included endings as well as beginnings. But here is where the true wisdom of her story reveals itself. Rather than being destroyed by this encounter with the Shadow Realm, Corey began the slow process of integration, learning not to reject these darker aspects of existence, but to understand their necessary place in the larger pattern of wholeness. The underworld was not her enemy, but her teacher, showing her dimensions of reality that her previous existence had been too sheltered to encompass. This process of shadow integration was neither quick nor easy. You can sense the stages of her transformation as she gradually adapted to her new environment. First came the shock and resistance, the natural response of any psyche suddenly confronted with aspects of reality it has never had to process. Then came the slow dawning of curiosity, the recognition that this dark realm had its own forms of beauty and meaning that were different from, but not necessarily inferior to, what she had known before. What aspect of yourself do you think you've had the hardest time accepting? For me, it has to be those moments when I realize I'm capable of thoughts or feelings that don't match my idealized self-image. There's something both humbling and liberating about accepting our complexity. As Persephone began to explore her new environment with growing confidence, she discovered that the qualities that had made her beloved in the world above, her compassion, her natural empathy, her ability to nurture growth, were not lost in the underworld, but transformed into new forms that served different but equally important purposes. Her gift for encouraging life became a gift for comforting the dead. Her talent for bringing joy became a talent for bringing peace to those who had suffered. The shadow work that Persephone underwent in the underworld was not about becoming dark or evil, but about becoming whole. She learned that true wisdom requires understanding not just the bright aspects of existence, but also the difficult, painful, and mysterious dimensions that most people prefer to avoid. She discovered that real strength comes not from remaining in safe, familiar territory, but from venturing into the unknown and learning to find meaning and purpose even there. This integration of light and shadow made her a more complete being than she had ever been as Corey, the eternal maiden. She retained all of her original qualities, her capacity for joy, her love of beauty, her gift for nurturing growth. But these were now balanced and deepened by hard-won understanding of life's complexities. She became someone who could appreciate light because she had experienced darkness, who could value life because she understood death, who could offer genuine comfort because she had known genuine suffering. When she eventually accepted the pomegranate seeds from Hades, she was making a conscious choice to embrace this integration rather than rejecting it. The seeds represented not entrapment, but commitment. The decision to remain connected to both aspects of her nature rather than trying to return to the incomplete existence she had known before her transformation. This psychological model of integration through confronting the shadow has profound implications for understanding our own processes of growth and development. It suggests that the experiences we find most challenging, the unexpected changes that disrupt our comfortable routines, the encounters with aspects of life we would prefer to avoid, the necessity of adapting to circumstances we never chose, often contain the seeds of our greatest transformations. Persephone's example shows us that we need not be destroyed by these encounters with our shadow aspects, but can instead learn to integrate them in ways that make us more complete, more wise, and more capable of serving others who are facing similar challenges. Her story provides a template for understanding how apparent catastrophes can become opportunities for growth, how forced changes can lead to expanded awareness, and how accepting the full spectrum of our nature can be liberating rather than limiting. The cyclical nature of her existence, spending part of each year in each realm, represents the ongoing nature of shadow work. Integration is not something that happens once and then is finished, but a continuous process of balancing different aspects of our nature, honoring both our light and dark sides, and finding ways to express our wholeness through service to the larger patterns of existence. Her role as Queen of the Underworld demonstrates how shadow integration can lead to forms of leadership and service that would be impossible without this deeper understanding. Her ability to comfort the grieving, guide the lost, and bring wisdom to complex situations all depend on her having confronted and integrated aspects of existence that most prefer to avoid. The beauty and dignity with which she carries out these responsibilities show that embracing our shadow doesn't make us dark or evil, but rather makes us more capable of bringing light to dark situations. Her presence in the underworld transforms it from a place of mere punishment or storage for the dead into a realm of healing, wisdom, and continued growth. This transformation of the underworld itself represents another crucial insight about shadow work. When we learn to integrate, rather than reject the difficult aspects of our experience, we often discover that what seemed purely negative actually contains hidden gifts and possibilities. The underworld becomes not a place to be feared, but a source of profound wisdom and strength. As you contemplate Persephone's integration of her shadow aspects, you begin to understand why her story has provided guidance for so many people facing their own encounters with the unknown and unwanted dimensions of existence. Her example suggests that we can survive and even thrive through experiences that initially seem to threaten our very identity, emerging not diminished but expanded, not weakened but strengthened by our willingness to embrace the full complexity of what it means to be alive. But Persephone's transformation could not have occurred without the guidance and support of another crucial figure in her story, Hecate, the mysterious goddess of magic and crossroads, whose torches illuminated the path through the darkest moments of the journey and whose wisdom provided essential guidance for navigating between different realms of existence. Picture Hecate as she first appears in Persephone's story, a tall, powerful figure emerging from the shadows with two torches blazing in her hands, their light casting dancing shadows that reveal as much as they illuminate. She is one of the few deities who heard Persephone's cries for help when Hades carried her away, and more importantly, she was willing to act on what she had witnessed. Hecate represents something unique among the Olympian deities, a goddess whose power comes not from ruling a single domain, but from her ability to move freely between different realms and levels of reality. She governs the crossroads where different paths meet, the liminal spaces where transformation becomes possible, and the hidden knowledge that allows navigation through the unknown territories of existence. When Demeter was searching frantically for her missing daughter, it was Hecate who provided the first reliable information about what had actually happened. But her contribution went far beyond simply reporting what she had seen. She offered to guide Demeter's search, to use her unique abilities to track Persephone across the boundaries between different realms. You can imagine the two goddesses working together during those desperate days of searching. Demeter driven by maternal love and anguish, Hecate providing the practical knowledge and magical skills necessary to follow a trail that led from the bright world above into the hidden depths below. Where Demeter's power was rooted in the productive forces of earth and growing things, Hecate's authority extended into the mysterious processes that govern transitions, transformations, and the movement between different states of being. Hecate's torches are not mere practical tools for providing light in dark places, but symbols of the illumination that comes from wisdom, intuition, and the ability to perceive hidden connections and patterns. Her light reveals not just what is visible on the surface, but what lies beneath, not just what exists in the present moment, but what connects past, present, and future in meaningful ways. When Persephone was finally located in the underworld, Hecate's role shifted from that of searcher and guide to that of counselor and companion. She became a bridge between Persephone's old life and her new existence, helping her understand that the dramatic change in her circumstances was not just loss, but also opportunity for growth and expanded awareness. What role do you think mentors and guides play in major life transitions? For me, it has to be that combination of practical wisdom and emotional support that helps you see possibilities you couldn't recognize on your own. There's something invaluable about having someone who's walked similar paths. Hecate's unique position among the gods made her particularly qualified for this role. As a goddess who regularly moved between the world of the living, the realm of the dead, and the domain of the Olympians, she understood the challenges and opportunities that come with existing in multiple realms simultaneously. She could help Persephone understand that her divided existence was not a punishment, but a form of expanded consciousness that few beings ever achieve. The magical knowledge that Hecate possessed, her understanding of herbs and potions, of rituals and ceremonies, of the hidden forces that govern change and transformation, became invaluable resources for Persephone as she adapted to her new role as queen of the underworld. Hecate taught her about the properties of the strange plants that grew in the realm of the dead, showed her how to use various substances and techniques to help souls through their transitions, and shared the accumulated wisdom of ages about working with the fundamental forces of existence. But, perhaps most importantly, Hecate provided emotional support during the most difficult phases of Persephone's transformation. She had witnessed countless transformations over the millennia, had guided numerous beings through the challenging process of adapting to new realities, and she understood both the pain and the potential that such changes involve. Her presence in the underworld as Persephone's companion and advisor created a sense of continuity between the world above and the realm below. She served as a living reminder that Persephone was not cut off from all connection to her previous existence, but was instead expanding her sphere of influence and understanding to encompass new dimensions of reality. The rituals and ceremonies that developed around Hecate's worship often focus on her role as a guide through transitions and transformations. People facing major changes in their lives, marriage, career shifts, geographical moves, spiritual initiations, would appeal to her for guidance and protection during these vulnerable periods when old patterns were breaking down and new ones had not yet been established. Her association with crossroads makes her particularly relevant to moments when people must make important choices that will determine the direction of their future development. At such crossroads, her torches provide the illumination necessary to see the full range of possibilities and to understand the likely consequences of different choices. The magical practices associated with Hecate often involve working with the liminal times and spaces where transformation is most likely to occur: midnight hours, threshold spaces, seasonal transitions, and the moments when one phase of life is ending and another is beginning. These are the times when her influence is strongest and when her guidance is most accessible to those who seek it. Her role in Persephone's story establishes a template for understanding how we can serve as guides and mentors for others who are facing their own encounters with unknown territories and unwanted changes. Like Hecate, we can offer practical wisdom gained from our own experiences of transformation, emotional support during difficult transitions, and the kind of illumination that helps people see possibilities they might not recognize on their own. The loyalty and dedication that Hecate shows to Persephone throughout her story provides a model for the kind of commitment that genuine mentorship requires. She doesn't abandon Persephone once the initial crisis is resolved, but continues to serve as advisor and companion throughout the ongoing process of adaptation and growth. This long-term commitment reflects an understanding that transformation is rarely a single event, but rather an ongoing process that requires sustained support and guidance. Hecate's continued presence in Persephone's life acknowledges that even goddesses need companionship and counsel as they navigate the complexities of expanded consciousness and increased responsibility. Her unique position as a deity who serves both the world above and the realm below makes her an ideal mediator when conflicts arise between these different spheres of existence. She can understand and represent the perspectives of both sides, helping to find solutions that serve the needs of all parties rather than favoring one over another. The magical tools and techniques that Hecate employs, her torches, her keys, her knowledge of herbs and potions, represent the practical skills and resources that effective guides and mentors bring to their work. These are not abstract philosophical concepts, but concrete capabilities that can make the difference between successful and unsuccessful navigation of challenging transitions. Her association with dogs and other animals that can move freely between different environments reflects her understanding of the instinctual wisdom that often guides us through transitions more effectively than purely rational analysis. Sometimes the most important guidance comes not from intellectual understanding, but from intuitive recognition of what feels right or wrong in a given situation. As you contemplate Hecate's crucial role in Persephone's story, you begin to understand why she has remained such a powerful figure in various wisdom traditions throughout history. Her example demonstrates the importance of having guides and mentors during times of transition, and it provides a model for how we can serve in that capacity for others who are facing their own journeys through unknown territories. Now let us examine Persephone's story through yet another lens, one that reveals how this ancient myth may actually preserve memories of very human customs and social practices that govern the lives of the people who first told these tales. When we look at the details of her abduction and marriage through the eyes of anthropologists and historians, we discover striking parallels to the actual wedding rituals practiced in ancient Greece. You must understand that in ancient Greek society, marriage was not primarily a romantic union between two individuals, but a complex social and economic arrangement between families. The process of getting married involved a series of ritualized steps that, when viewed from our modern perspective, might seem quite shocking in their apparent violence and coercion. The typical Greek wedding began with what was literally called an abduction. The groom and his male companions would arrive at the bride's family home and ceremonially steal her away from her mother and female relatives. This was not actual kidnapping, of course, but a ritualized enactment of separation that acknowledged the profound nature of the transition the young woman was undergoing. Picture a young Greek bride on her wedding day, dressed in her finest robes and adorned with flowers and jewelry, surrounded by the women of her family who have cared for her throughout her childhood. She knows that when the sun sets, men will come to take her away from everything familiar and comfortable, to transport her to a new household where she will be expected to take on entirely new roles and responsibilities. The parallels to Persephone's experience are striking and cannot be coincidental. Like the mythological core, the human bride was literally called a core, maiden, before her marriage and would become a gyne, woman-wife, afterward. The transformation was not just legal or social, but was understood to be a fundamental change in her very identity and status. The ceremonial abduction served multiple symbolic purposes. It acknowledged that leaving one's birth family to join a new household was a form of death. The death of childhood, of the carefree existence under parental protection, of the identity that had been formed within the familiar structures of the natal home. But it also represented birth, the birth of new adult responsibilities, new relationships, new possibilities for growth and development. The violence implicit in this ritual abduction was not accidental, but reflected a widespread understanding that significant transformations are rarely easy or comfortable. The bride's tears and protests were expected and considered appropriate. They demonstrated proper attachment to her family of origin and proper appreciation for the magnitude of the change she was undergoing. But just as Persephone eventually adapted to her new role and found sources of meaning and power within it, Greek brides were expected to move through their initial grief and resistance to discover the satisfactions and opportunities available in their new status. The successful bride would learn to find joy and fulfillment in her expanded roles as wife, household manager, and eventually mother. Which life transitions have felt most like leaving one world behind for a completely different one? For me, it has to be those moments when you realize there's no going back to who you used to be. There's something both terrifying and exhilarating about that kind of complete transformation. The seasonal aspect of Persephone's myth also corresponds to patterns in ancient Greek family life. Young women typically married in late fall or early winter during the months when agricultural work was less demanding and when families had leisure time for celebration and ceremony. The timing meant that brides were separated from their natal families during the darkest months of the year, reinforcing the themes of death, separation, and journey into unknown territories. The return of spring, when Persephone rejoined her mother Demeter, coincided with the season when newly married women would typically return to visit their birth families for the first time since their weddings. These visits served multiple purposes. They allowed the bride to demonstrate her successful adaptation to married life, provided opportunities for the two families to strengthen their new alliance, and offered emotional support during what was often still a difficult period of adjustment. The agricultural symbolism woven throughout Persephone's story would have resonated powerfully with people whose lives were intimately connected to the rhythms of planting, growing, and harvesting. The parallel between the bride's journey from her mother's protection to her husband's household and the seed's journey from the storehouse to burial in dark earth and eventual emergence as new growth would have provided a comforting framework for understanding a potentially traumatic life transition. The pomegranate seeds that Persephone consumed in the underworld carry particular significance when viewed in this anthropological context. The pomegranate was a traditional wedding symbol in ancient Greece, representing fertility, abundance, and the hope for many children. The act of eating these seeds can be understood as Persephone's acceptance of her new role as wife and her commitment to making the marriage successful and fruitful. The number of seeds, 6, may also carry specific meaning related to the timing of ancient Greek wedding customs and the expectations for when a new bride would be ready to take on full adult responsibilities within her new household. The 6 months she spent in each realm could correspond to the period of adjustment and adaptation that was considered normal and necessary for new brides. Demeter's grief and the resulting famine can be read as representing the very real emotional and practical disruptions that occurred when daughters left their natal families. Mothers genuinely mourned the loss of their daughters' daily presence and assistance, and households did face real challenges when experienced workers and contributors left to join different family units. The eventual compromise that allowed Persephone to spend time in both realms reflects the reality that successful marriages in ancient Greek society required maintaining connections to both the husband's and wife's extended families. Women who were completely cut off from their birth families often struggled with isolation and depression, while those who maintained some connection to their origins typically adapted more successfully to their new circumstances. The role of Hades in this anthropological reading becomes more complex and nuanced. Rather than simply representing male domination or patriarchal oppression, he can be seen as embodying the challenges and opportunities that marriage represented for ancient Greek women. Like the underworld itself, marriage was a realm that offered different forms of power and influence than those available to unmarried women, but required adaptation to very different rules and expectations. The respect and authority that Persephone eventually achieves as queen of the underworld parallels the real power that successful wives and mothers could wield within ancient Greek households. While this power was different from the authority exercised by men, it was nonetheless real and significant, encompassing influence over domestic arrangements, child-rearing practices, religious observances, and social relationships. The rituals and ceremonies that developed around Persephone's worship, particularly the Eleusinian Mysteries, can be understood as providing psychological and spiritual support for women facing the challenges of marriage and motherhood. The secret knowledge imparted to initiates likely included practical wisdom about how to navigate the complexities of adult relationships and responsibilities. This anthropological perspective on Persephone's story doesn't diminish its spiritual or psychological significance, but rather adds another layer of meaning that connects the mythological narrative to the lived experiences of the people who preserved and transmitted these tales. It shows how ancient peoples used storytelling to process and make sense of the major transitions and challenges that structured their lives. The fact that this particular story has survived and continued to resonate across different cultures and time periods suggests that it captures something universal about the human experience of growth, change, and adaptation. Whether we frame it in terms of psychology, spirituality, or anthropology, Persephone's journey from maiden to queen provides a template for understanding how we can navigate our own encounters with the unknown and emerge from them stronger and wiser than before. The recognition that Persephone's myth preserves ancient wedding customs also helps us understand why her story has been particularly meaningful to women throughout history. It validates the reality that major life transitions often involve real loss and grief, even when they also bring new opportunities, and it provides a framework for understanding how these transitions can be successfully navigated. As you consider this anthropological dimension of Persephone's story, you gain deeper appreciation for the wisdom of ancient peoples who created myths that serve not just as entertainment, but as practical guides for navigating the complexities of human existence. Their stories continue to offer insights and support for anyone facing the challenges of growth, change, and adaptation to new circumstances. Let us now turn our attention to the remarkable flora of the underworld. Those spectral blooms and ghostly meadows that provide beauty and meaning within the realm of the dead. Just as the world above has its roses and lilies, its vibrant displays of seasonal color and fragrance, the underworld possesses its own unique botanical wonders that serve the souls who dwell there and create landscapes of haunting beauty unlike anything found in the land of the living. You must envision the asphodel meadows as they stretch endlessly across the twilight landscape of the underworld. Vast fields of pale, ethereal flowers that glow with their own soft inner light. These are not the bright, cheerful blooms of springtime gardens, but something far more subtle and mysterious, flowers that seem to exist at the boundary between substance and spirit, between memory and dream. The asphodel flower itself is a tall, graceful plant with slender stems that rise from the dark earth like reaching fingers, crowned with clusters of small, star-like blossoms that shimmer with an opalescent gleam. In the world above, asphodels are simple white or yellow flowers that grow wild in rocky places, often blooming where little else can survive. But in the underworld, they are transformed into something altogether more magical and meaningful. Each asphodel bloom in the underworld carries within its petals the essence of a memory, not specific memories belonging to individual souls, but the collective memory of what it means to have been alive, to have experienced joy and sorrow, love and loss, hope and disappointment. When the gentle winds of the underworld stir these flowers, they release fragrances that speak of all the experiences that make existence precious and poignant. As you walk through these meadows with Persephone, you can observe how the souls of ordinary people, those who lived neither heroically good nor wickedly evil lives, wander among the asphodels in a state of peaceful contemplation. These are not the tormented spirits of Tartarus or the blessed residents of Elysium, but the vast majority of human souls who led quiet, decent lives and now dwell in a realm of gentle twilight and soft remembrance. The asphodels provide comfort to these wandering spirits, offering them a landscape that is neither harsh nor overstimulating, but perfectly suited to their contemplative existence. The flowers seem to respond to the presence of souls, glowing more brightly when spirits approach and releasing their memory-laden fragrances in ways that help the dead process and integrate their earthly experiences. Persephone has learned to read the language of these flowers, to understand what their changing colors and intensities reveal about the emotional states of the souls who move among them. When a spirit is struggling with unresolved grief or regret, the asphodels around them take on deeper, more melancholy hues. When a soul achieves a moment of peace or insight, the flowers brighten and seem to dance in celebration. But the asphodel is not the only flower that graces the underworld landscape. Growing alongside these pale blooms are the poppies, flowers that carry even deeper symbolic significance and serve crucial purposes in the realm of the dead. The poppy is perhaps the most perfectly designed flower for the underworld, its deep red petals the color of blood, and its seeds containing substances that bring sleep, ease pain, and provide release from suffering. What natural setting brings you the most peace during difficult times? For me, it has to be places where there's a sense of timelessness and quiet growth. There's something healing about environments that exist at their own pace, undisturbed by human urgency. In the world above, poppies grow wild in grain fields, their bright red blooms appearing suddenly among the golden wheat and barley that Demeter tends. This connection between Demeter's domain and the underworld is no accident. The poppy serves as a bridge between the realm of life and the land of death, appearing in both but serving different purposes in each. Above ground, poppies represent the beauty that can emerge from the most practical and mundane activities. Farmers don't plant them deliberately, yet they appear each year among the crops, adding unexpected splashes of colour to the agricultural landscape. They remind observers that beauty and wonder can arise spontaneously even in the midst of practical work and daily routine. In the underworld, these same flowers take on more profound significance. The poppies that grow in Hades' realm are larger and more luminous than their earthly counterparts, their petals seeming to contain deep pools of red light that draw the eye and soothe the spirit. But their true power lies not in their appearance, but in their ability to provide relief from the various forms of suffering that souls may carry with them from their earthly lives. Persephone has learned to cultivate these underworld poppies with particular care, understanding their crucial role in her work as Queen of the Dead. She knows which varieties provide the gentlest forms of healing sleep, which ones help souls release traumatic memories that prevent them from finding peace, and which ones assist in the process of letting go of attachments that no longer serve any useful purpose. The gardens where she grows these poppies are among the most beautiful and therapeutic spaces in the underworld. Here, souls who arrive carrying heavy burdens of pain, guilt, or unresolved trauma can find the healing they need to move forward in their spiritual development. The flowers don't simply mask suffering, but help transform it into wisdom and compassion that can benefit other souls facing similar challenges. The process of creating these poppy essences requires great skill and sensitivity. Persephone must harvest the flowers at precisely the right moments, when their healing properties are strongest and their potential for harm is minimized. She prepares them using techniques that blend conventional herbalism with the unique magical properties available in the underworld, creating remedies that work on spiritual as well as emotional levels. Working with these flowers has given Persephone deeper understanding of the relationship between pleasure and pain, between relief and responsibility. She has learned that the goal is not to eliminate all discomfort from existence. Such discomfort often serves important purposes in motivating growth and change, but rather to provide relief from unnecessary suffering that serves no constructive purpose. The other flowers that grow in the underworld each serve their own specific purposes in supporting the complex ecosystem of death and renewal. There are the memory flowers that help souls preserve their most precious experiences from earthly life. the forgetting flowers that assist in releasing painful or irrelevant memories, and the wisdom flowers that help integrate different life experiences into coherent understanding. There are flowers of gratitude that help souls appreciate what they gained from their earthly existence, flowers of forgiveness that facilitate healing from old wounds and resentments, and flowers of hope that prepare souls for whatever form their continued existence may take. Each variety has been cultivated by Persephone to serve specific aspects of the healing and development process that souls undergo in the underworld. The gardens themselves are works of art that reflect Persephone's sophisticated understanding of landscape design and its psychological effects. She arranges the different flowers in patterns that guide souls through gradual processes of healing and growth, creating pathways that lead from confusion to clarity, from pain to peace, from isolation to connection with the larger community of spirits. The colours in these gardens are unlike anything found in earthly landscapes. While they include the familiar reds of poppies and the pale whites of asphodels, they also feature hues that exist only in the underworld. Deep purples that seem to absorb and transform sorrow, silver blues that bring clarity to confused thoughts, and golden greens that encourage continued growth and development. The fragrances of these flowers work directly on the consciousness of souls, bypassing the need for physical sensory organs and speaking directly to the essential nature of each spirit. A single breath of the right flower essence can dissolve years of accumulated bitterness, inspire profound insights into the meaning of past experiences, or provide the courage needed to face difficult truths about oneself. The seasonal cycles that govern these underworld gardens follow different patterns than those in the world above. Rather than being determined by solar rhythms, they respond to the collective emotional and spiritual needs of the souls who dwell in the underworld. When many souls are struggling with similar issues, the appropriate healing flowers bloom more abundantly. When the general population is in a period of stability and contentment, the gardens shift toward varieties that support continued growth and exploration. Persephone's mastery of this underworld horticulture represents one of her most significant contributions to her realm. She has transformed what could have been a sterile landscape of judgment and punishment into a living ecosystem that supports healing, growth, and the continued development of consciousness after death. Her gardens provide evidence that even in the realm of endings, there are always possibilities for renewal and transformation. The knowledge she has gained through working with these flowers also enhances her effectiveness in her seasonal visits to the world above. She brings with her understanding of healing processes that can benefit the living as well as the dead, insights into the transformation of suffering into wisdom that can help mortals navigate their own difficulties with greater skill and compassion. As you contemplate these magnificent gardens with their unique flowers and their capacity to provide healing and growth in the midst of the realm of death, you begin to understand another dimension of why Persephone's story has remained so compelling across cultures and centuries. Her example shows how even the most challenging environments can be transformed into places of beauty and meaning through conscious effort and loving care. Finally, let us explore how Persephone's story connects to similar myths found in cultures around the world, revealing universal human concerns about death, renewal, and the possibility of return from the land of the dead. When we examine these parallel tales, we discover that Persephone's journey is not unique to Greek mythology, but represents one expression of archetypal patterns that emerge spontaneously in human consciousness across different times and places. The most ancient and influential of these parallel myths comes from Mesopotamia, where the Sumerian goddess Inanna undertakes a journey to the underworld that shares remarkable similarities with Persephone's story. Inanna was the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility, ruling over the upper world much as Persephone did in her aspect as Kore, the maiden of eternal spring. Picture Inanna as she prepares for her descent to the underworld, adorned with the 7 divine powers that mark her status as Queen of Heaven and Earth. She wears the crown of the steppe, the measuring rod and line of lapis lazuli, the small lapis lazuli stones, the pectoral, the golden ring, and the breastplate called "Come, Man, Come." Each of these represents an aspect of her authority and identity that she will be forced to relinquish during her journey through the 7 gates of the underworld. Inanna's journey begins with a conscious decision to visit her sister Ereshkigal, who rules the land of the dead. Unlike Persephone's abduction, Inanna chooses her descent, but like Persephone, she discovers that entering the underworld involves surrendering her previous identity and status. At each of the 7 gates, she must remove one of her divine powers, arriving in the presence of Ereshkigal stripped of everything that had defined her in the upper world. This stripping away of identity and power parallels Persephone's transformation from the carefree maiden core to someone who must learn entirely new ways of being and acting. Both goddesses must confront the reality that the qualities that serve them well in the world above may not be relevant or helpful in the realm of the dead. Inanna's death in the underworld, she is literally killed by Ereshkigal and hung on a hook for 3 days, represents an even more extreme version of the death and rebirth cycle that Persephone experiences. But, like Persephone, Inanna is eventually restored to life and returns to the upper world, bringing with her wisdom and power gained through her encounter with death and the unconscious realms. The agricultural implications of Inanna's story also parallel those found in Persephone's myth. During the time when Inanna is trapped in the underworld, fertility and growth cease in the world above. Plants wither, animals stop reproducing, and the very continuation of life is threatened until the goddess can be restored to her proper place in the cosmic order. In Norse mythology, the story of Balder's death provides another variation on these archetypal themes. Balder, the god of light, purity, and beauty, is beloved by all the gods except for the trickster Loki, who engineers his death through treachery and deception. Like Persephone's abduction, Balder's death is not a natural occurrence, but the result of a deliberate act by a figure associated with the darker aspects of existence. Which mythological tradition do you find most compelling when it comes to stories about death and rebirth? For me, it has to be the ones that show transformation as a necessary part of growth rather than just a tragic ending. There's something powerful about myths that find meaning in difficult experiences. The grief that follows Balder's death parallels Demeter's response to Persephone's disappearance. Balder's mother Frigg travels throughout the 9 worlds seeking promises from all things that they will not harm her son, just as Demeter searches frantically throughout the earth looking for signs of her missing daughter. The cosmic disruption caused by Balder's death affects the stability of the entire Norse pantheon, just as Persephone's absence threatens all mortal life through the failure of crops and the coming of eternal winter. The attempted rescue of Balder from the underworld involves negotiations with Hel, the goddess of the dead, who agrees to release him if all things in the world will weep for him. This condition parallels the complex negotiations that eventually lead to Persephone's partial return to the world above. In both cases, the restoration of the lost deity requires cosmic cooperation and compromise rather than simple divine decree. However, unlike Persephone's story, Balder's tale ends in failure. One being refuses to weep for him, and he remains trapped in the underworld until the end of the world. This difference may reflect varying cultural attitudes toward death and the possibility of renewal, with the Norse tradition being more pessimistic about the possibility of overcoming the forces of destruction and decay. In Egyptian mythology, the story of Osiris provides perhaps the most elaborate and influential version of the death and rebirth archetype. Osiris, god of fertility and the underworld, is murdered by his jealous brother Set, dismembered and scattered throughout Egypt. His devoted wife Isis searches for the pieces of his body and eventually reassembles them, restoring him to life through her magical powers. Like Persephone's transformation from maiden to queen, Osiris's restoration involves a fundamental change in his nature and role. He cannot return to his previous existence as a god of the living, but instead becomes ruler of the dead, presiding over the judgment of souls and the processes of death and rebirth that govern all existence. The agricultural symbolism in Osiris's story is even more explicit than in Persephone's myth. His death and resurrection are directly connected to the annual flooding of the Nile River, which brings fertility to the Egyptian countryside. His dismembered body represents the scattered seeds that must be buried in the earth before new growth can emerge, and his resurrection symbolizes the sprouting of new crops that sustain life throughout the year. From Japan comes the myth of Izanami and Izanagi, the creator deities whose story includes themes of death, separation, and the impossibility of returning from the underworld unchanged. After Izanami dies in childbirth, her husband Izanagi descends to the underworld seeking to bring her back to the world of the living. However, he discovers that she has already eaten the food of the dead and can never return. This aspect of the Japanese myth closely parallels the pomegranate seeds that bind Persephone to the underworld. Both stories recognize that consuming the food of the dead creates an unbreakable connection to that realm, fundamentally altering the nature of the being who partakes of it. The transformation that occurs in the underworld is graphically illustrated in the Japanese myth. When Izanagi sees his wife in the land of the dead, he discovers that she has become a rotting corpse, no longer the beautiful goddess he once knew. This shocking revelation leads to their permanent separation and establishes the boundary between life and death that governs human existence. These cross-cultural parallels suggest that the themes explored in Persephone's story address fundamental human concerns that transcend specific cultural contexts. The fear of death, the hope for renewal, the necessity of transformation, and the possibility of finding meaning through difficult experiences appear to be universal aspects of human consciousness that naturally express themselves through mythological narratives. The variations among these different traditions reveal how different cultures have approached these universal themes based on their particular environmental conditions, social structures, and philosophical orientations. Agricultural societies tend to emphasize seasonal cycles and the connection between death and rebirth, while societies with different economic bases may focus more on other aspects of the archetypal pattern. The persistence of these themes in contemporary culture, in literature, film, psychology, and spiritual practices demonstrates their continued relevance to human experience. Modern stories of heroes' journeys, therapeutic processes of death and rebirth, and spiritual practices of initiation and transformation all draw on the same archetypal patterns that ancient peoples explored through myths like Persephone's. The psychological insights embedded in these myths anticipate many concepts that have been formally developed in modern depth psychology. The idea that growth requires encountering and integrating shadow aspects of experience, that transformation often involves a symbolic death and rebirth, and that wisdom emerges through conscious engagement with difficulty. These insights appear consistently across different mythological traditions and continue to inform contemporary approaches to healing and personal development. The ecological wisdom contained in these myths is particularly relevant to contemporary concerns about sustainability and the relationship between human activity and natural cycles. The recognition that death and decay are necessary components of renewal and growth, that periods of dormancy and rest are essential for long-term productivity, and that attempts to maintain constant growth without allowing for natural cycles ultimately lead to exhaustion and collapse. These insights from ancient myths provide guidance for addressing modern environmental challenges. As you contemplate these remarkable parallels between Persephone's story and similar myths from around the world, you gain deeper appreciation for the universal human experiences that these tales address. They remind us that the challenges we face as individuals, the necessity of growth through difficulty, the reality of loss and change, the possibility of finding meaning in suffering, are not unique to our particular circumstances, but represent fundamental aspects of what it means to be human. These myths also provide reassurance that the transformative potential they describe is not limited to divine beings, but represents possibilities available to anyone willing to engage consciously with the challenges and opportunities that life presents. Like Persephone learning to find meaning and power in unexpected circumstances, we too can discover that our most difficult experiences often contain the seeds of our greatest growth and wisdom. The enduring power of these stories lies in their ability to provide frameworks for understanding and navigating the complexities of existence. They offer hope that no experience is meaningless, that every ending contains the potential for new beginnings, and that the conscious integration of all aspects of our experience, light and dark, pleasant and painful, chosen and imposed, can lead to forms of wisdom and compassion that benefit not only ourselves, but others who share this journey of growth and transformation. And so, dear dreamers, as we conclude this deep exploration into the many layers of meaning contained within Persephone's eternal story, you carry with you not just the tale of one goddess's transformation, but insights into the universal patterns that govern all growth, all healing, all conscious evolution from innocence through experience to hard-won wisdom. Her journey from the sunlit meadows of eternal spring to the shadowed depths of the underworld and back again represents every soul's movement through the cycles of expansion and contraction, encounter and integration, loss and renewal that characterize conscious existence. Her example shows us that we need not be diminished by the unexpected turns our lives may take, but can instead discover in them opportunities for forms of growth and service we never previously imagined. The pomegranate seeds that bound her to the underworld become symbols of all the conscious choices we make to embrace the full complexity of existence, rather than limiting ourselves to only its pleasant aspects. Her integration of maiden and queen, of life and death, of light and shadow, provides a template for our own work of becoming whole rather than merely comfortable. May your own encounters with the unknown and unwanted aspects of existence be guided by her example of conscious engagement and patient integration. May you find, as she did, that every ending contains new beginnings, that every loss can become a form of wisdom, and that the most meaningful life is one that serves the larger patterns of growth and renewal that connect us all. Sleep well and dream of eternal springs that bloom in the depths of every winter, of light that shines most brightly in the darkest places, and of the endless possibility for transformation that exists in every moment of conscious choice. Good night, dear dreamers, and may you wake tomorrow a little closer to the wholeness that Persephone's story reveals as our shared human birthright.